Whoa, sorry, that was very loud. Hi everyone, can you please all just check that you have your clicker with your name on it? If you have a blank one, please come up to the front. And if you have Danny Chang's, also please come up to the front. Again, please double check on the back of your clicker that it has your name on it. Please, thank you. Okay, great. It is 7:06 and the meeting is now called to order. Please stand for O Canada. Now we will sing the Western song. W is up. Western, Western, Western U. College fair and square. Arts and leisure strong for you. Deny it if you dare. You don't know. Colors are one by one and row. This is probably the best. Come and let it show. 'Cause this you is our you. And for her we'll strive to do our best to fight with might and main. What's Maine? We will always adore her. Alma mater. Western School of Fame. And when the team goes marching down the field, no team will never ever yield. And the other team has also got to see our team. They'll know they're out of step. And when the game goes down in history, history's another Western victory. Victory! Cheers go out for Western U. Western U. Rah, rah, rah. Western U. W-E-S-T-E-R-N. Western, Western, Western. Woo! And the land recognition. Western University is situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples, who have long-standing relationships to the land and region of southwestern Ontario and the City of London. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. Western values the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island, North America. You may now be seated. Okay, polls are now open for a roll call. And please make sure that your clicker is lighting up when you're pressing it. Okay, 3, 2, 1, polls are closed. Okay, great. Okay, so as most of you hopefully know from Liz's email, she is no longer in her position with the USC. So myself and Nick and other people will be kind of taking on some of her tasks that she did for council. So I made the agenda for today, which is why it was sent from me and not from Elizabeth. If you don't know, she's moved on to another position with the Secretariat. She didn't leave Western, so she'll still be around. So going forward, if you have any questions and with regards to standing committee motions and that kind of stuff, it will be going through me until a replacement is hired, which probably won't be until January just because it's going into the Christmas season, holiday season. Yeah, that's all I have to say. We will move on to our consent agenda. At this time, would anyone like to remove a motion from the consent agenda? Councillor Stebbing.
I'd like to motion to remove the community standards policy from the agenda. I've spoke with both the associate governance and associate clubs, and we feel at this time it needs further review before being brought to council.
So that's the first motion on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay. I will look for a seconder to remove that motion from the agenda as a whole. Councillor Baldwin. All those in favor of removing this motion as a whole? Okay, that motion passes. At this time, I would like to bring a motion to council to move the second consent motion to our for action section. This motion is with regards to bylaw amendments that were brought forward and passed at the AGM last year. This motion is tied with our council composition procedure motion that we have under the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. So it just makes a little more sense to have them one after the other. It's also a bylaw amendment, which is a little weird to have in the consent agenda. I will look for a mover and a seconder to move that into our for action section. Councillor Roque-Aisley, Councillor Fernandez. All those in favor of moving that motion to our for action section? Okay, thank you. That motion has been moved. Okay, we will now move on to approve our agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Yes, Vice President Chang.
Hi. I would like to move to amend the agenda to add a presentation from Western's AVP of Student Experience on student thriving and the restructuring of the student experience portfolio. The allocation for that is a 15-minute presentation and a 5-minute Q&A, and I'd like to do it at the end of the other presentations.
At the end of the...
Well, after the other presentations.
Okay.
But point of disclaimer, I might need to table it till when she's able to come here and present, which is at 8:30 p.m. But it will sit there in the agenda for now.
Okay, great. I will look for a seconder for that motion. Okay, Councillor Campbell. All those in favor of adding that presentation to our agenda? Okay, great. Thank you. Any other amendments to the agenda at this time? Councillor Somani.
Florian Somani, here on councillor. I just wanted to, what am I doing here? I just wanted to move the motion 5.
The motion for the referenda?
Yeah, the referendum to motion, up to motion 1. And I also wanted to change the Q&A of the health plan presentation from 5 minutes to 15 minutes.
Okay, so we'll do one motion at a time.
Sure.
So as far as the motion moving the referenda to the first motion under governance and finance, I will look for a seconder for that. Councillor Teja, all those in favor of moving that motion? Okay, great, thank you. And as far as your second motion is concerned, the health plan presentation, bumping that Q&A up to 15 minutes.
Yeah, the only reason why I would like a 15-minute Q&A is just because we're looking at increasing funding to the health plan, so I don't think 5 minutes is enough for any Q&As that we might have.
Okay, I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Kamenetsky, all those in favor of increasing that Q&A to 15 minutes? Okay, great. It is increased to 15 minutes.
Thanks,
Any other amendments at this time to the agenda? Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
Would there be a question period automatically added on to the additional presentation of 5 minutes?
The AVP?
Yes.
There is a 5-minute Q&A, yes. Great. Okay, any objections to the agenda as amended? Okay, seeing none, I'll take it as approved. We'll move on to our approval of the minutes. So these are the minutes from our last meeting. All those in, actually just kidding. Any amendments to the minutes? Any objections? Seeing none, I take as approved. Sorry, we're just trying to switch presentations after those amendments. Okay, we now have our first presentation, the health plan presentation from a PBAS representative. So if you want to come up and present. Okay, great.
We want to control that?
It's here, so you can just
Do you mind?
signal.
Yeah. Okay. Doesn't matter what we talk into? Into this? Do you want to be here?
No, I'm loud enough. Am I loud enough?
Oh, you got to be recorded.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
We have an additional mic in the corner there if you like.
Oh, that's way better. Sometimes I pretend that I'm watching the presentation as well.
Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Paul Tucker, and this is Owen Ralph, and we're here to tell you a little bit about the Campus Trust, which is your benefits provider. Kind of who they are, what they are, and who we are, and your whole plans, everything. So we'll get into that. If we can go on the next slide. Okay, so the first thing you need to know when you're talking about your benefit plans is how does insurance work? This might seem pretty bare bones, but when it comes down to it, what you're doing when you buy insurance, you're transferring the risk. You transfer the cost of a potential loss to an insurance company or broker, basically. So you're saying if you buy regular insurance, you're telling an insurance provider, oh. Can we get the lights turned down so we can see the screen? Sure.
Yeah.
Is that at all better? It might be hard to read. And that's kind of dark. Basically, the way insurance companies come up with their rates, their premiums that they charge you, is student usage plus plan cost. That equals rates. So whatever students claim, whatever they go out and actually use, so if they go get a massage or go to the dentist or go get drugs or go get physio, whatever it is, all that adds up, and then you add on top of it any fees and expenses, so what it costs to actually run the plan, and there's your rates. Am I losing anybody? That's pretty simple, right? Okay, so if we go to the next one. So insurance companies, they add a lot of factors in. So there's what students use, but then that plan cost side, they're adding in, we won't have to go through all these things, but they're adding on a fee for claims payment, they're adding on a fee for underwriting for the risk of paying these claims, they're adding on profit for their shareholders, and they're adding on commissions. They're adding all these things on top to give you a premium, right? So it ends up being pretty expensive when you run your insurance plans through a typical broker insurance model. Does that make sense? Easy enough again? Okay. Anything you want to add there? No?
No, you're doing good. You're doing
Okay.
good.
So the USC used to run your plan, your benefit plan, that way that I just talked about. Like most of the schools in Canada, you had a broker, you had an insurance company, and you ran things that way. But the problem is, these insurance companies, they're not evil or anything, they're not bad, it's just that they're a business who's looking to make money. And in your case, they're looking to make money off of students, right? So they're adding in all that profit and risk that I talked about. Because at the end of the day, what they're looking for, who they're looking to serve, is their shareholder. They'd be number one. Shareholder's number one. Number two might be your students. So your past exec back in 1998, we can go to the next one now, next slide. Back in 1998, figured they had enough with that. Pardon? Oh. They had enough of that deal, that arrangement. They said there must be something better. So back in 1998, your past exec and the exec at Acadia University and at Memorial University looked around and said there's got to be something better, and they found trust funds. Lots of different unions in Canada use trust funds to run their benefit plans, and they said, okay, well, why can't we do that? And they did. So your exec back in 1998 founded the Campus Trust. You were one of the original, what's called a settlor of this trust fund. So in 98, those three schools came together, and the trust fund is a not-for-profit alternative to what most schools in Canada do. Instead of giving the money, instead of allowing the insurance companies to make money off your students, run it yourselves. It's your trust fund. Keep the money yourself.
Paul, I also, other reasons that, we've been around since, for myself, for 2001, and Paul's been around since 2012. So we weren't actually at the table, but from what we've heard, the reasons that Western and Memorial and Acadia also wanted to know about, putting it in a trust fund, is trust funds are very transparent because legally, the trustees are required to have all of the information. So all of the information then would go back to to the students, to the student unions, so that they could basically make the decisions that they needed to make. Sometimes what's known is, you basically would get a rate, and then you would say, okay, well, my rate goes up or my rate goes down. Well, what does that really say about usage? What does that really say about how much, how much money they made off the backs of students? And basically, in 1998, Jim Walden was I guess the CEO, but I don't think it was called that back then, right, was in charge of the benefit plan, and he said, there's got to be a better way. So like Paul said, he went to the unions, and he looked at, the unions been around doing the trust funds since about 1950, and they thought, this is a better way. We're going to reduce the amount of money that we spend in expense, we're going to know more information, and then we're going to know exactly what, what the students are, what they're using, we get more details. We're in charge. We're going to manage our benefit plan. And by taking over the management, it reduces the expense a ton. So Paul had a slide here earlier where it said 80%. So it literally is. Insurance companies offer 10% commissions to brokers. Then they offer 4% for claims payment. They need to make money too because they have to run their operations. So right at the start, because we do broker some plans because there are sometimes insurance plans that require insurance. So when there's insurance required, we do look towards it. But there's been cases that we look at where they're running loss ratios around 60%. So that's 40% expense factor.
Yeah, so if you don't understand what that means, 60% loss ratio would mean that what you're paying in your fee, 60% of that is going to what students are claiming, and the other 40% is fees on top and expenses.
So for the majority of the years that you've operated with the Campus Trust, you've actually operated your benefit plan at 8%, which is less than what an insurance company offers for commission. So it's kind of funny because what you've actually done is you brought yourself to the game, and you actually are a player at the table, so you get to make the decisions.
Yeah. So yeah, that's 98, and if we go to the next one, so like I said, there were 3 original schools in the next one. Now you're up to 12 across Canada. And just to give you an idea of how big that is, there's around 90,000 students at these schools in total, if you add them all up. About 30 or 40 are here, but still, about 90,000 in total. And the whole point is to provide benefits to students. That's the purpose of the trust fund. If you keep going. And this is one I really want to focus on here. So the profits go to benefit your plan members. Plan members are your students. So a really simple example, let's say that the USC paid $7 million into the trust fund one year. And then it turned out, no, you know what, differently. Let's start with the insurance company. Let's say that you paid an insurance company $7 million. And it turns out your students only used about $6 million. So there's an extra $1 million that you paid. Whether you're an insurance company, they say thanks, they take the money, they put it in their pocket, they give it to shareholders, all that stuff, and they say, whatever, well, let's try it again next year. If you're with the Campus Trust, if you're in a trust fund model, that $1 million extra stays with you. No one takes it. It never belongs to anybody else. It stays in your reserves, and you can use it to help future students, to improve your coverage in future years, all that great kind of stuff.
Which has happened, okay? So over numerous times in the trust fund, that has happened. You've actually increased your health plan, your practitioners. So all the practitioner coverage was actually increased, I think, around 2009. You added eye exams. And that was at no cost to the students because you had a reserve as well. And then I believe there was some additional counseling that was added to your benefit plan because it used to cover it up to $300 and you raised it to $500. You've actually raised it even further than that, but that was under the insured model because we did a little bit of negotiation. So.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one here. Okay, so to understand what a trust fund is, here's the definition. I don't know if you actually want to read that, but basically the Campus Trust is a trust fund. It's a fund whose assets are managed by a trustee or board of trustees, in your case, for the benefit of another party or parties. And a really simple example, I've actually got $20 on me. Go on.
Does everybody here understand, like, have you heard, like, old school where, they've left, parents are leaving money in trust for somebody because until they're 18 or something like that? Everyone understands that concept?
Yeah. So
okay.
You're giving money to somebody else to manage, and they have a bunch of rules as to when they can spend that money or what they can do with it. So I could give Owen $20. There you go. And I could tell him that money is still my money. He's holding it in trust for me. And I could say that money is to buy, there's too many of you, but I'd say some of you donuts or something. Timbits. Under certain conditions. If you guys answer a test about this later or something, you get every question right, then you get Timbits, basically. So I've given him the money. He's holding it in trust. There's a set of rules, and the beneficiaries are you guys. Easy enough? That's what the campus trust is. You guys are paying money into the campus trust with the purpose of spending it for health and dental benefits for your students. That's all it can be used for legally. And the trustees, one of which is right here, actually, there's 10 of them on the campus trust, they have the responsibility of looking after that money and making sure that it's only spent for what it's meant to be spent for. Easy enough again? I see some nods. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So I like this bucket. I don't even know if you can see it at the back, but this bucket kind of shows you how a trust fund works. This is your bucket of money, basically. This is your bank. The money coming in is called contributions. That's what all the schools pay into the campus trust. Oops, sorry. And the main thing coming out are benefits. So when a student goes to get a massage or physio and a chiropractor, all those things. In the perfect situation, perfect scenario, that would just be money in, money out, right? The exact money you put in is the exact money coming out. That doesn't happen. It's not ideal. So you hope that you're putting a little bit more into the bucket than you're taking out so that you can actually afford it. And you can see at the bottom there's a little trickle for fees and expenses. Because you also, as you'll see in a second, you hire some other companies like us to do things like pay the claims, answer phone calls, run the website, make documents, all that kind of thing. You have a lawyer, you have an auditor, all those things. Now, the Campus Trust always recommends that each school holds, like remember that example I was saying, $7 million in, $6 million out, you have a surplus of $1 million there? The Campus Trust, the trustees always recommend that you're holding enough in your bucket to cover about 3 to 6 months of expenses. So a quarter of a year to a half of a year, basically, at all times. Because what happens in 1 year if everybody gets sick or something and everybody suddenly uses the plan and now you paid $7 million in but $8 million gets used? Well, you're going to use that full $7 million that went in and then you're going to have to dip into your reserves a little bit. That's what it's a buffer, basically, if something goes wrong. The great thing is that all 12 schools in the trust have that buffer. So that money is sitting there, so the trustees actually hire an investment manager, which is that weird thing on the top, investment earnings, they're that weird valve, and they make more money for you, basically.
What's that money used for?
Same thing that your surplus is used for. It's used to improve your benefits for students. You can use it for things like Mental Health Week. And remember, everything in the trust has that specific purpose of health and dental benefits. So if you made $100,000 in investments, you couldn't turn around and I don't know, renovate that room over there or something. That's not health and dental benefits, right? There's specific things it has to be used for.
So Paul, you actually spoke about how it works out if you had $7 million paid in, but you only had $6 million in claims. What happens if you had $8 million in claims?
So let's look at it two ways. Insurance company, you paid them $7 million, but it turns out they needed $8 million. Well, for that year, the insurance company is in the hole $1 million. And what they're going to do at the end of the year, they're going to come up to you and say, okay, you need a huge rate increase because they want to get their money back, right? And they don't want that to happen again. Okay, so that's what happens if you're insured. If you're self-funded, if you're through the trust, what's going to happen? You're going to dip into your reserves, and you probably don't want that to happen again, so you're probably going to raise your rates.
So what you're saying is it's exactly the same in the bad scenario,
yeah.
But in the good scenario, you get to keep the money.
Yeah.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Thanks. Okay, these are the 12 schools. I don't know if you can see it again at the back, but I don't know if you want to go through them, but there's these two at the beginning. There's your settlers, the people who started the trust, and then everyone else has kind of joined after the fact. We won't go through them all. Here's the 10 trustees. 2 of them, they're kind of highlighted. Nick
Vasiliou
Andrea.
and Andrea. So
Are
they're
from here.
students and management trustees, and that's just done for continuity purposes?
Sorry, just a quick question. How many of those trustees are students?
5.
And which ones are those?
The ones on the right.
It says student trustees here and the management trustees here as well.
Sure. And Andrea is a student?
Yeah, in
Or
terms
she's
of the
an
campus
elected,
trust.
an appointed, official?
Yeah.
Actually, technically, I am a student, which is why I'm proxying Danny Chang today, because I am a current student. But yes, I'm also hired by the USC. So.
But not democratically elected, to represent the USC, just for clarification?
Mitchell Pratt, University Student Council President. Although Andrea is hired through a hiring process, she's hired through 3 votes, 1 member representative from the board, 1 representative from council, and myself. So 2 elected representatives and also a hired representative for the fiduciary responsibility. So therefore vested in her is and
she comes and communicates to me as a trustee of the board, and I trust her as one of the staff and members of the executive.
So just to clarify, not elected by students, is that correct?
Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So those are the trustees. We'll go next one. Okay, this one's really small. You really can't read this, I'm sure, at the back. This gives you a general idea of the structure of the trust. So at the very top there, that's all the different student unions. And from the student unions comes the trustees, the 10 of them. And they're the ones who are ultimately responsible. And when I say ultimately responsible, let's say that one of those 90,000 students who are the beneficiaries of the trust didn't like something that the campus trust, the board, decided. They can get sued. Like Andrea can get sued. Not like just the board, but Andrea can get sued. So it's a big deal being a trustee. You're looking after a lot of money and there's a lot of responsibility. And they're the ones who are ultimately in charge. But they hire all these people off to the sides. For example, there's an administrator there, and that's our company. Because you might not realize this, but we are not the campus trust. You guys are the campus, you guys are the campus trust. The campus trust, the board, hires a separate company, us, to run all the day-to-day stuff. Like talk to students and pay the claims and manage the bank account, all that kind of stuff. And everything that the board does is for the people at the bottom there, the beneficiaries, your students, right? Okay.
But Paul, one second.
Sorry.
So you have all these advisors. To me, doesn't that look like that looks expensive? Does anyone else think that looks expensive? I'm going, you have a lawyer, you have an investment manager, and an auditor. Well, is that expensive or?
No, so I should point out each one of these people that the board hires gets reviewed every single year and goes to, and the board will go to RFP, request for proposals, and like go out to tender and see if prices are, you know, they can get a better price anywhere, that kind of thing. I'll point, like, let's say you were insured, you weren't through the trust fund model, so all you were paying was an insurance company. The insurance company has all these things on their own. They have their own auditor, they have their own investment manager, they have their own legal counsel that they're paying. They just put it into your rate. You don't see it, you just see one rate. You don't see 6 different things that you can manage separately. So no, I'd say this is cheaper.
Hi, sorry, your allotted time is up. I would just ask if, do you know how much time you might need to finish up the presentation?
We can make it a lot quicker than that. We could skip over a bunch of things.
Sure.
Okay.
Like 5 minutes?
Okay, I will look for a mover and a seconder if you'd like to extend. Councillor Hollenberg, for how long? 5 minutes? Okay, a seconder, Councillor Kamenetsky. All those in favor of extending for 5 minutes on the presentation?
Okay.
Okay, great.
We'll go quick.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay, great. You have 5 more minutes.
Okay, skip. That's us. We're going to skip this one. We're educated and highly qualified, and we have lots of things. Okay, skip this. We're going to talk. That was about the campus trust and what it is. Now I wanted to show you kind of what, I don't know how well you guys know your plan. Every school has a different plan, by the way, tailored to, like, your own exec council comes up with your coverage.
And it's based on utilization, so every year we review reports to show where students are spending their money so that we basically tailor the plan to your students' needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's what you guys have decided. Yeah. And as an example, I think you guys raised your counseling last year up for another $250, and that was basically done by the executive because they could.
We're going to skip that. I just showed some information here. Here's your plan enrollment over the last 5 years. As you see, it's been going up. Lots of people apparently like your plan. And from your winter survey results, you were the health plan, or the health and dental plan, #2 for the USC services that provide value, #2 for most important. I think those are both behind the bus pass. I think that was #1 for both. And it's one of the most utilized services other than the spoke and your clubs. Next. Okay, if you don't know the timeline, back in '98, your health plan was implemented, just the health plan. And there was a yearly fee increase cap of 5% per year. And then skip forward to 2012. Oh, sorry, no. Back you go. 2012, you added the dental plan. The yearly increase for that was not 5%. It was actually tied to CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And you also raised the health plan fee a little bit by $10, and you increased the original cap from 5% to 7%. And then in 2014, the board went out to RFP for our services and chose to stay with us. In 2016, you added a whole bunch of services downstairs, which was amazing for students. Now they can go, if they're sick or hurt or whatever, everything is in this building, which is unreal. But claims went through the roof, right? Because people could now access a lot more. And then currently, I have the rates there that you're currently paying. And let's go through, because we don't have
Next one.
Okay, so some issues to bring up. So that access to care, again, the more access to care you have, the more students are going to use the plan. And if you remember way back on that first slide, rates are just how much they use the plan and how much it costs to run the plan. OHIP Plus, for those of you who don't know, as of March coming up, it's changing. So it's going to become the second payer. So when a student makes a claim for prescription drugs or uses prescription drugs, it's going to be paid by your plan first and then OHIP Plus. So that also makes usage go up. Recently, you added eyewear coverage because when OHIP Plus was implemented originally, you guys decided, or your exec decided, or whoever decided that that savings that your plan was getting by the government taking that piece, you were going to give back to your students, and you added eyewear coverage, which was awesome. But it means, again, usage goes up. And lately, your current insurer, I don't know how we're doing on time, your current insurer is Manulife. There's been some issues. Students have been having problems getting their money back, basically. The great thing about self-funding is Manulife goes away, and it goes back to being paid in our offices, which is so much more flexible and way more control.
So our goal is to make sure that we pay students' claims, where an insurance company is trying to protect the fund that they're obviously trying to protect their profit margin. So we actually pay more claims than an insurer would, because we're looking on your behalf of each student. That's the goal, is to protect the student's health.
Yeah. So the referendum that I believe is going to be brought up is that the idea you take 9% increases to both plans for 2 years in a row. The idea for doing that instead of the maximums that you have already in place, it just financially makes a bit more sense and makes it a little bit more stable. You're eating into your, remember that bucket? You're eating into the reserves a little less when you do it this way. You're setting yourself better for the future.
And the part that I like about it, by going to referendum, what it actually does is it allows your students to make the decision themselves, rather than, the council making the decision, or, having the advisors make the decision, or the executive. This puts it in front of the students. They get to choose. Yeah. And the last time you did this, students actually, it was like the biggest turnout you had for a referendum. So it was actually something that the students valued. So that's something that I think is important as well.
Yeah. So that's it. There we go. Thank you for the extra 5 minutes.
Okay, we now have 15 minutes of questions, starting with Councillor Yee.
Hi, Frankie, Science President. Thank you guys for coming to give us a presentation today. So my question really regarding this, with this increase on students, essentially what it will be, I understand it to kind of adjust for the increases in claims and increases in coverage. However, with the changes that are coming to OHIP Plus, I think something on a lot of students' minds, including myself personally, there is still the issue of limited use drugs within many of these private coverages, including the one that the school currently has. For medications such as Pulmicort, which is for limited to uses for issues with cystic fibrosis or more serious lung issues, but a lot of individuals who suffer from chronic illnesses also need these medications, but these aren't covered. And so currently for a lot of students, these drugs cost somewhere monthly around $100 to $150 just to get, because these plans don't cover it and OHIP Plus won't cover it. Mm-hmm. So with this increase, is there any sort of, is there any going to be increases in coverage, increases in addressing these limited use drugs? Can
I speak to that? Okay, so actually the way the benefit plan is set up is there is a formulary. What that means is it covers the majority of drugs for the majority of people in your population. So it's actually reviewed by an independent pharmacist that has nothing to do with the campus trust. So they independently review this. Now, what is available is something called a drug exception form. And I actually am the person who signs the bills for the drug exception forms. They are never turned away. So the coverage is always available for those students. So I'm not sure if you've actually had a particular case like this, but I know that they would actually find you a drug that you can be covered. The goal is to find you the most cost-effective version of that drug. Mm-hmm. So you would have to fill out a drug exception form from your doctor and send it in so that we can have an independent pharmacist review it. But there's always coverage for the students, and that's the main point.
Councillor Somani.
So Paul and Owen, can we talk about your role? And you guys are employed by who, sorry?
I work for a company called the Prudent Benefit Administrative Services.
Prudent Benefit Administration Services Incorporated. Is that correct?
We're a third-party administration company.
You're a health plan administrator for the campus trust. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's right. So just to be clear, we have the USC who pays premiums. We have Campus Trust as a non-profit organization, and then we have PBS, these two guys here, and their sales pitch, and then we have an insurance company. So there's 4 scenarios that we get through, before a payment's made to the insurance company. And I would like to note that like they talked about, or I guess you guys talked about campus trust and...
Point of clarification, is there a question?
Sure. I guess the question is, do you guys have any financial statements that you'd be able to provide us other than a bucket of water?
Well, I don't, for sure, Andrea actually does review our statements. I don't know if we would provide them to the council, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with you at any time where we could meet and we could go through things that we have been approved to talk about. No problem. The way that works with the Campus Trust and PBAS is we are transparent. We're actually probably the most transparent provider in the student benefit industry because what we're trying to do is to make sure that the money goes to the right places.
Can I
Do you have a
respond to
follow-up?
that question?
Is it a follow-up question?
It's not. It's common, I guess.
Okay. I think we'll move on with our questions.
That's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Hollenberg?
Joshua Holberg, law counselor. Thank you very much. I particularly appreciated the summary of trusts, which I'll point out is a full semester in law school, so kudos. So my question goes back to the trust itself. Just a quick question, are the funds earmarked in that are they kept separate for each university or are they commingled? And if they are commingled, are we by any chance subsidizing smaller universities?
Great question. So when the auditor looks at it, it is commingled. The auditor doesn't look at the USC, ASU, blah, blah, blah. They say the Campus Trust. We break it down further than that on our side because the auditor does their financial statements and then we do a separate financial statement that shows this part is belonging to the USC. So if a school were to, for example, leave or something, we know how much of that commingled amount is theirs from year to year. But yes, some years you do subsidize. Right now, if I'm this off the top of my head, the 12 schools, I think everybody's doing well except I'd say Laurentian.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so one school is being subsidized essentially by the other 11 right now. But the trustees know all this and they see all the money every year. They see the financial statements and everything. And they know what Laurentian is doing to try to get out of that and reverse that and pay the money back.
And I really want to talk to that because you're leaving out something that's very important.
Sure.
So Laurentian, the way it works is there's interest income earned on everybody's money, okay? So everybody's money sits in that bucket, and there's interest earned on it. So Laurentian actually earns negative interest because they're using your money or other schools' money, because in actual fact, your surplus was not as high as the other schools within the trust. Just a couple of years ago, you didn't have a very big surplus at all. So you were actually almost to the break-even point. But with the steps of the past executive, the 3 or 4 years, you've actually brought yourself back up to a really good position. So that money that sits there is commingled, but it's all accounted for, and the investment returns actually go back to the schools. So Laurentian actually earns a negative amount, and the USC would actually would get a positive amount. So all that money is absolutely separated.
Councillor Liu? Is it a follow-up question? No. Okay, I'll add you to the list. Councillor Liu?
Cecilia Liu, music president. Also, thank you again for coming in and speaking to us about this. My question is sort of pertaining to Frank's question earlier about drug use and paying for prescribed drugs for students. So in a case specifically birth control for female students, a drug that usually the cost-effective version might not be the best version because it is a very hormonal drug. And there has been many instances, and I've heard personal stories where females have gone to the pharmacy and they've gotten the most cost-effective drug, but not the drug that works for them and may have possible side effects. So how would you plan on maybe solving this problem or being able to address it?
So first of all birth control is covered under the USC plan. So if you're under the impression that something's not covered on birth control, you can definitely forward that to me because I'll make sure that I'm under the impression that it all is covered. There are definitely forms of birth control. As an example, Depo-Provera. It's not advisable. I wouldn't advise anybody to use it because it's a permanent shot and it has irreversible bone density loss. But you know what I'm saying is, I'm under the impression that all birth control is covered. So Marina is covered, J-Des is covered, all the natural stuff. Things like condoms and stuff are not covered. I know it is birth control, but obviously it doesn't have a DIN number. So the way it works is a DIN, which is a drug identification number, if it doesn't have a DIN, it can't be proved by Health Canada, which means that it's not covered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor O'Connor?
Hi, sorry. Jordan O'Connor, social science counselor. I just had a question about the last point that you guys said was like a concern with Manulife, or what? I just didn't understand your explanation.
Okay, so
If you could go back.
who here is on the plan right now? Okay, so who was on the plan last year? Okay, so there's a difference in the service provider. So Manulife, in order for them to take over your insurance, your plan, they basically said, hey, we have to be the claims payment officer. So they are actually the ones paying your claim. We previously were the claims payment. And the way it works at Manulife is trying to protect their bottom line. So Manulife tries to make it harder for you to submit claims. I like Manulife, I have nothing against it. But their goal is to protect Manulife. In what we do, honestly, the philosophy of our company is, how can I help the student? So we don't look out for the shareholder, which is what Manulife is looking out for. We're looking out for the policyholder, which is the students. We want to make sure that we can put as much money back into the student's pocket of what they spent for an unforeseen medical condition, whether it's birth control, whether it's physiotherapy. The goal is to get the claim paid. So if there's a reason for us to pay it, we're going to pay it. Obviously, you're not breaking the rules. You're just paying what's supposed to be allowed. Does that make sense?
Can I just clarify something?
Yep.
So when a student makes a claim or someone makes a claim, it used to go through Campus Trust, but now goes through Manulife?
Correct.
Okay.
Councillor Hollenberg.
Joshua Hollenberg, law counselor. So I just kind of wanted to ask, I guess there's no way to ask this kind of politely, but just bluntly, fee percentages in terms of what we're paying now versus some of the comparables. You've mentioned Manulife. If you have any other comparables, I'd appreciate to know that, just to get an idea of what kind of the, what's being taken off of that pot of money on an annualized basis.
So I can tell you about our expenses, because we do receive 10% commission from Manulife in terms of your plan. So I can tell you that. I do not know Manulife's expense factors because they do not provide them. But I can tell you typically expense factors for plans that we work with are between 24 and 35%. So they're making a huge profit margin. Our goal is to make sure, and I'll tell you, this is hilarious, but Nick, which is one of the trustees, always says to me, Owen, you keep recommending self-funding, and you're going to make less money. Why would you do that? And I say, because Nick, it's going to make your plan better. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about, because we would like to have a long-term relationship with the students at the USC, and that's what we do, is so we protect your interests. So that's all I can say in regards to expense factors.
Councillor Dinesi, did you have a question? Okay.
So Councillor Dinesi, science counselor. So, I mean, ultimately we're looking towards having a referendum about this. So if a student just in general comes up to me and says, okay, if I vote for this referendum, what tangible benefits am I going to get out of it versus if I kind of vote against it, what am I going to see cut or what negatives are going to come out of it? How do I answer that? You know, is there something that they're actually going to get if they vote for this, or are they going to be seeing kind of the same stuff?
Okay, so what we did is we were told to approach this from the perspective of that you're trying to be sustainable, okay? Not that you're trying to add benefits. If you were trying to add benefits, it is something that we could do. We could actually go back and include the percentages and add in what you're going to do for extra benefits. However, if you do not increase your plan, you're going to run out of money, which means that you're going to have to cut benefits. And cutting benefits is normally a horrible thing, and I'll tell you why. There's people upstairs that they do come in about, drug coverage being reduced, or your practitioners have actually been combined this year, which has actually had a ton of complaints. So if you do not fix your problem now, you're going to end up with reduction in coverage. So that basically, there's only two ways to do it. You either increase your fees or you reduce the coverage. That's basically the way the benefit plan works. Does that make sense?
Councillor Yee. Okay. Councillor Somani.
What percentage of the fees goes to PBAS?
Manulife pays us 10%.
Manulife pays you guys 10%?
Correct. Of what you pay to Manulife. Correct.
So each student pays about 130 plus 130, 260, 22,551 students, 10% off that. Okay,
Well, take tax off first and then, but yes.
You have to remove the tax first.
Sure, thanks.
But yeah.
Councillor Campbell. Okay. Councillor Murray. Thank you.
As you guys have cited in the presentation and answer period, that there's a lot of red tape when it comes to Manulife. So what is being done to fix it and to have students be able to access those funds?
So we've actually done a lot of things, and actually we've done this with the help of your team. So since September 1st, the very first day your plan went into action, there was some problems with OHIP Plus. We do not receive addresses from behalf of the USC, which means that we basically, Manulife was saying that everybody is from Ontario, and I said, no, they're not all from Ontario, so that's not going to work. So they were treating everybody as an Ontario person. So Manulife's rule is there's no way to get around this. We fought Manulife, and they changed that mid-September. Okay, so they've actually updated that, and now we do not have the problem when you swipe your card. It actually says the right thing. The second thing is they were doing a lot of problems with payments in regards to pay direct benefits to providers. So what they were doing is Manulife was saying to the student, no, I'm sorry, you're going to have to pay up front. We've actually fixed that. We went back to Manulife and said, that's not going to work for us. These are the providers that we work with, and we need you to have them set up immediately, which they've done. And we have actually seen a big turnaround in what they have done. However, we do still see some problems because it's just about how, if you can guarantee, like I can guarantee what's being done in our office, where I can't guarantee what they're doing in a Manulife office. So what we've been doing is working through each problem as they come forth. I have to be honest, we're not hearing as many problems as we were at the very beginning because we have worked through them as they come forward.
But the best way to fix the Manulife problems, in my opinion, is to get rid of them. Like we said before, the 5 different things it has to go through, get rid of one of those, right? Sorry, but keep going.
And that reduces your expenses as well.
I don't want to take up too much time.
Councillor Watson?
Lucy Watson, Health Sci Counselor. I'm just curious, I read a document saying that about 22,000 students from our school in undergrad are using the plan, but I'm just curious if you actually have numbers on how many students are actually filing claims with the plan.
Yep. Yeah, we provide that on an annual basis.
Yep. I actually had that report today. It's in my bag over there. On the health plan, it's around 50% of people, actually a little bit lower, I think, 45, 46, something like that, percent of people use the plan who are on it. The dental plan's less, it's about 30, and both of those are around the trust average in general.
But basically, you really do claim about what most students do. And I will tell you an example of this. Paul is actually a Western grad. He went here for 5 years, he paid for the plan for 5 years, he never made one claim ever. So it goes to show you that, and it's normally males that don't use the plan, but that's what happens. So it is what it is, and it is part of the plan. But that's what actually keeps your costs so low. It's because the majority, we always say that, the majority of the people, if everybody claimed, your plan would be double. So there are people that are on the plan that actually are helping people that are not, that are actually utilizing the plan. Does that make sense?
Okay, so that's actually the end of the allotted question time. I have 2 people on my list who'd like to ask questions. If someone would like to motion to extend the question period. Councillor Stebbing?
Motion to extend for 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay, I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Marfil. All those in favor of extending for 10 minutes for the Q&A? Okay, sorry, keep yours up very high. Okay, that passes. We have 10 more minutes of Q&A, starting now with Councillor Salmani.
So you guys said if the insurance company isn't giving us a good deal, we would just get rid of them. You were talking about Manulife. Mm-hmm. We've only been with Manulife for about a year. If we just keep changing insurance companies on a rolling basis, on a yearly basis, wouldn't that ruin our credit or credibility with that insurance company?
Really great question. Mm-hmm. Now, I can tell you about why you've utilized the many insurance companies you have. You've actually taken them for what they're worth. I'm not kidding. So what we do as a benefits consulting company is we actually sit and go through your claims. In 2016, we knew that you've created additional access to service downstairs. We knew you added a dental clinic, your physiotherapy clinic was here, you have your pharmacist. Your claims were going through the roof. The insurance companies did not know. So what we did is we leveraged the insurance companies and our relationship with the insurance companies, because we actually are a huge company, okay? So we have over 1 million beneficiaries that are employees, over $2 billion in assets that we manage on a regular basis. And what we did is we went to, first of all, we went to Industrial Alliance, and they gave us a really, really good rate. And then they realized we didn't put the tax in that rate. Well, at the same time, we pitted Great West Life against Industrial Alliance. And what we did is when Great West Life matched the rate, what we did is we turned around and said, okay, great. We told Great West Life, you're going to lose money on this account. And they said, we don't care. In the first year, they lost over $1 million on your plan. And that's, you know what? You guys made $500,000 and put it in your reserves. In the second year, they lost $1 million. That's $2 million that your students would have had to pay, that your students had claims for, that we messed up our relationship with a major insurance company so that we could make sure that your students got what they deserved. Further, last year we went out to all the insurance companies, which included Sun Life, Great West Life, Manulife, SSQ, and Industrial Alliance. The only one that came back with a rate that was lower than what you had currently was Manulife. So we went with Manulife through the help of your executive and through your team, and we decided that Manulife was the best fit for your students at this year. We were unaware at that time that service problems would have come the way they did because it was such an easy transition with Great West Life. So what we would do is if we had to, we would happily go out to tender for you again and find you another insurance company because our goal is to protect the students at the USC, not to protect the insurance company.
Okay. Councillor Anthony.
Proxy for Councillor Anthony. So you said earlier that the two options are to increase our fees by way of premium increase or reduce our coverages. Have you considered increasing the deductibles for students making these claims, potentially eliminating like nuisance claims and the total volume being paid out?
Yeah, we've looked at deductibles before, or co-pays. They're basically the same thing. But however, it all depends on what we're doing. So what we've done is we've set up the services around the USC. So the ones that are around here normally do have no co-pays attached to what they're doing. And the reason that it's set up that way is it gives students access to care. So by including a deductible, you're actually stepping on the foot of the person who actually requires the medications or the things as well. However, we're open to do whatever. We have worked with your team to develop the plan how you guys want it. So if you guys were interested in having deductibles on all your benefits, sure, we can do that.
Because that's a key part of the trust is that we don't decide what your coverage is. You guys do, or your exec team does, or whatever. So if deductibles are something you wanted, one of my jobs as a consultant is to play with the numbers and show you the impact it could have. And I could totally show you what could happen in that situation. And then it'd be up to you to say, yep, we want that.
I think the strategy has always been about making sure the access to care is there for the people that need what they need.
Okay. Councillor Foreman.
Jared Foreman, Social Science President. So earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that annual increases are capped at 5% for the health plan and CPI for the dental plan. What has it actually been increasing on an annual basis, just generally in the past, let's say, 10 years or so?
Okay, so from 1998 to 2008, it did not increase at all. And that was a part of the problem, because you weren't actually going up with inflation. So for 10 years, you didn't make any increases. It did give you a little bit of a buffer, but when you actually hit 2008, it went, oh God, we got to do a little bit more. So you did add about 5%, I think, in 2008, and you have added other additional increases, mostly 2 and 3%, never the 5. And there was one time in 2000, we looked at it earlier. You did a referendum in 2012 where you asked for an additional $10, so which was more than the 5%. So since 1998, your plan has increased 44%, which is actually it's about 2% per year, which is very low if you consider that inflation sometimes is around 5%.
Okay. Councillor Somani.
So Florian Solmani here on councillor. Earlier in the presentation, you guys mentioned your interest is obviously to protect the students. Is that right? But we obviously know that you guys are a for-profit company. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
And then you guys make commission as well on top of the claims?
No.
10% commission is not made by Manulife?
So you either get commission or we get claims payment. We do not get both. What we do is if we get paid commission, we give back the rest of our fees. So that's very simple. So we don't want to get paid twice. A lot of the other companies out there actually do get paid twice.
But you do get paid, is that correct?
Yes. Everybody gets paid.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Councillor Hollenberg?
So I just wanted to clarify something. It seems like there's maybe a bit of confusion in the air. it's on a percentage basis, and if the person who's acting for the trust, be that self-rep by the trust, or be that Manulife, or be that another insurance company, it's a percentage on top of what they get. So were we to go to a self-fund model where there's less payment going up, then the amount of money that you guys get also goes down, and you're okay with that because students?
Correct.
And my boss hates me for it, but she understands it because it's the way it works.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. 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 So, okay, so at this time, so earlier when we were talking about the consent agenda, we removed the community standards policy, but I forgot to ask if anyone objects to the consent agenda before we move on. And then in that case, you pass the rest of the items on the consent agenda. No one objects? Okay, great. I'll take it as unanimous consent. Okay, so our second presentation will be at 8:30, so we're going to continue on with our 4 action items. Okay. Per Councillor Somani's amendment earlier, we will now debate motion 6, so the health and dental referenda. I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Baldwin and Councillor Stebbing. Are there any questions regarding this? Oh, sorry. Councillor Stebbing, would you like to speak to this motion? Councillor Baldwin, would you like to speak to this motion? Okay.
All right, so this motion has been through numerous consultations with the Campus Trust and representatives from PBAS, and just as we saw, and with the referendum fee working group, and as well as governance and finance. And we feel that we've developed it enough that we can bring it to council in order to bring it to students so that they'll have final say over how their student fees are increased, that's why we brought the motion.
Okay, are there any questions regarding this motion?
Sorry, a point of information. Could I speak on the motion as well, since I was under the fee review working group?
I will put you first on my list for debate.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor?
Sorry, this is more of a clarifying question. So if this goes to referendum, I know that there's like rules about what we can tell students and like how like that goes about. Is there, just because it's kind of a confusing question and I wouldn't know unless we sat through this presentation, is there like, I'm kind of looking to think of that, is there like education pieces that we're going to give students, or you know what I mean?
So there is a policy that says the USC itself can't run they can run an information campaign, but they can't run register as an interest party. However, I believe that Campus Trust might be running, might register as an interest party to like kind of educate students on what this referendum means. Obviously, we can't include that much on the ballot. It's not meant to provide sort of the context. I think all of that will be done through the information surrounding sort of the campaign, just as any other kind of campaign.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hollenberg.
Just a point of clarification, what would be the result of a no vote on this? Would there be an alternative, or would there simply be no increase?
Yes, so following a no vote, then we will likely still increase it by a percentage deemed reasonable. I think we'd probably enter into consultations with counselors and students and sort of see what that means, and also try to decide sort of how we want to remodel our health plan and what kind of deductibles we can decrease, and come up with like some sort of balanced strategy that takes into the consideration of the no vote. So,
Any other questions regarding this motion? Councillor Danesi.
So to clarify, sorry, what you just said, so if there is a no vote, are we still bound by that 5% cap, or will we look at increasing it beyond that for next year?
So as soon as the amendment portion of this is happening, it's actually, I will amend the 5% cap, it's actually a 7% cap on health because of a previous, I'll explain all of that. But yes, we will, no matter what, then we are still bound by the previous caps set in place by previous referendums. So we'll just revert to that. But yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Campbell?
Ann Campbell, Social Science Counselor. Can you just explain the 9, like where you got the 9 from?
So the referendum fee working group, in a consultation with the Secretary Treasurer and the Associate Finance, were presented with 2 main options, 9% a year for 2 years or 7% a year for 3 years. The difference in why Governance and Finance ended up approving the 9% over 2 years is because that, in a contingency scenario, means we burn less of our reserves while bridging the gap to get to where we need to be for the fee. With a 7%, we'd be looking at depleting our reserves substantially more than a 9% over 2 years.
Okay, any other questions before we move on to debate? Okay, seeing none, we will now enter debate, starting with Councillor Somani.
Motion to amend, can
I will let Councillor Somani speak first, and then I will come to you.
So as most of you can tell by my frustration,
sorry, are you speaking for or against the motion?
I'm speaking against the motion. So I, as part of the under the fee review working group with Jack and with Ryan, have obviously spent like about, we could say, close to a month reviewing the finances of this health and dental increase. And like the reason why I'm speaking against this motion is because we have no information of where the money's going. So there's a huge lack of accountability in terms of where the finances are going, how much PBS is getting, PBSA is getting paid, how much fees is costing us through campus trust, the legal, the health administrator, the administrators themselves who we have to pay, who we pay salaries into. So there isn't, like, and the fee review working group asked for this information as well and has yet to receive it before this meeting started. And I met with Nick as well before this meeting, probably about an hour ago. And again, I still haven't been able to receive information. So I, who has spent about a month and a half kind of like advocating on this motion and haven't received enough information to be confident in it, I would say the same for the fellow councillors. That, like, I, as an individual who kind of knows the ins and outs of the proposed plan, doesn't feel confident in it. And the reason why I haven't informed Jack and Ryan is because of timing, right? So we haven't discussed. So I apologize in advance, but yeah, that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you. Proxy for Vice President Chang.
Could I move to amend the motion?
Yes.
Quickly. And I sent you the amendment.
Yep.
So, could I explain the amendment?
Yes, please
Okay.
do.
So essentially, the amendment, the reason for the amendment is that we discovered, as was presented in the timeline, that in 2011-2012, they had a motion to increase the health plan by $10, and that also set the cap not at the original 5% from the 1998 referendum, but at a 7% for the health plan. So once we found out that information, we realized that the motion itself, where it said the existing 5% cap on increases was incorrect. The dental plan does not have it has a cap on increases that is close to it, which is tied to the inflation in Ontario. I think this year it's around 5%, and so we set that also to go to a 7% cap. So that is the amendment.
Okay. I'll look for a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Stebbing. Okay. Councillor Somani, did you have a question about that amendment?
No, I wanted to propose to call to question.
On this amendment?
On this motion?
We have to call to question on the amendment first.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding that amendment? Okay, we will vote on that amendment. All those in favor of increasing it to 7%? Okay, that motion to amend passes. We will now return to debate on the motion as amended. Councillor Macaulay, you're on my list.
Erin Macaulay, Ivy Councillor. I'd like to speak in favor of this motion. I think what's really important to remember is that this is council approving a question to go out to the student body, and I think that this is a fair question, especially since the limit within the executive's power is up to 7%. So I think that they'll use their discretion to go up to 9% if needed, but I think that it's important that the students make this choice about their health plan, and I think we should enable the students to make that choice. So we should work to make them as educated as possible, but I don't think we should shut this down at the council level, because though we are representatives of the student, with something as large and as important as the health plan, it should be up to the entire student body to decide how much they choose to pay.
Okay, Councillor Salmani.
Yeah, so propose to call to question to table this motion. So propose
Sorry.
to call the question?
Call to question or
Yeah.
table?
Table. Or can we call first?
Would you like to vote on this motion?
I want to table this motion.
You're looking to table this motion?
That's right.
Until when?
Until we could have more information, especially the finances, from all additional 3 organizations, such as Campus Trust, PBSA, and Manulife as well.
Okay, I will look for a seconder for that motion to table. Point of information? Mm-hmm.
How early would we need to have this motion come back to council in order for it to be able to go into the 2019 election?
That is a good question for one of the executives. President Pratt?
Per our legislative calendar, this would be the last meeting in which we would be able to pass a referendum to go to the general election period.
Okay. Again, I look for a seconder for that motion to table. Sorry?
Would we not have to exhaust the debate speaker list on the floor before we entertain motions to table?
Sorry, could you say?
Would we not have to exhaust the existing speaker list before we table before we entertain motions to table?
No.
No? Okay.
No. Councillor Watson, was that a second to that motion to table? Yes? Okay, all those in favor of tabling this motion until we have more information? Okay, that motion does not pass. We will return to debate on this motion with Councillor Hollenberg.
Joshua Hollenberg, Law Counselor. I just want to speak to this idea of obtaining more financial information. We're dealing with several of these companies that we're dealing with are large, complex, I believe in many cases, private companies. They are under no obligation, legal or otherwise, to disclose their financial information, and in fact, doing so may constitute for them a potential violation or breach of a lot of trade secrets. I want to also reflect on this concept of the Campus Trust. Like, this is not Campus Trust Incorporated Limited, LLC. This is not a corporation. A trust is where the beneficial ownership of money is split from the control of the money. So we have handed the money, as was just, shown up earlier, so that someone holds the money and uses it, but expressly for the purpose, for the beneficial use of another person. In that case, the beneficiaries of that use are us. A trustee is personally liable for a breach of their fiduciary duties. These are duties that are owed under law to the beneficiaries. One of these duties is the duty of loyalty. It requires that the trustee administrator, that a trustee administers the trust solely in the interest of the beneficiaries. To do otherwise would put them in legal jeopardy. So we're not we don't have to worry that the people who are using this money on our behalf are doing so in a way that is nefarious or underhanded or shadowy, because they're legally bound to do so on our behalf and in our best interest. And that means, especially when we're talking about something where they're using the money for our health benefits, right, that they do so in a way that provides as much money for us to use for our health benefits and to minimize the amount of money that they use on other things, such as fees and other money that has to get paid out in order for this to actually work, for us to be able to go to the doctor and never have to pay a cent other than our student fees. So I don't think we can get this information. I don't think anyone's required to give it to us, and nor do I think they will give it to us. And two, we can trust under law that the money is being used to our benefit.
Just a point of clarification. We can get all that information by Nick V, and he's offered to provide us that information. So
regardless, we don't need to work.
No crosstalk. Thank you.
So in sum, I move that I strongly encourage everyone to vote in favor of this motion to put the question to the student body so that we can move forward with the full funding of our health benefits, and so we don't have to deal in the next year or two with cuts to our benefits.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lawler.
Kieran Lawler, social science counselor, speaking in favor of the motion. Yeah, I kind of just want to echo what's been said previously already. Like when it comes down to is basically what was said in the presentation. We either have a choice to raise these fees or to cut our benefits, and I think when it comes to that, the choice should be pretty clear. And also in regards to like trying to vote down this motion, we're not increasing the fees right away by ourselves. Obviously, we're putting the question to the students as to whether or not they want to do this. I think it'd be a failure of our duty not to try and put that question forward and not to allow the students to have their say on this. They elected us to do these things, to represent them, and to have their voices be amplified by our powers, right?
Just a point of clarification. Just because we raise the fees, that doesn't mean the students are going to receive better health coverage. There are multiple sections within this system that we have that people are being paid out. So all this money that we're contributing is being paid out to multiple services. And the thing is as well is...
Point of order, that's opinion and is no way based in fact and is going well beyond clarifying any point that was previously made.
I agree, thank you. Okay, Councillor Lawler, are you...
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap up, basically, like, I don't know, it just comes down to me. It's like, do we want to continue providing high quality health services, or do we want to end up with more cuts, and which will end up harming students and in the long run, or, we put the vote to them where they can choose whether or not what they want. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Lucy Watson, Health Sci Counselor. So first of all, I'm on the GNF committee, and we had a meeting a while back just kind of to get a first look at this. And
sorry, are you for or against?
Speaking against this motion.
Okay,
sorry.
Thank you.
So and from what I understood from that meeting, we were told that basically the increased fees proposed are in order to maintain the status quo, which already involves like cuts to like current services. Like psych services has been cut this year, among like others, based on the insurance company change. And despite like already talking about it ad nauseum at the GNF committee and hearing the presentation tonight even, I still don't really fully understand the scope, even if like I don't need to see exactly personally like how much each person's making or where like every cent is going, but I do personally want a better picture of like a breakdown between insurance going through like regular insurance companies versus the trust, because a lot of this like discussion to me sounds like we're talking about cutting benefits versus increasing fees, whereas I'm pretty sure this is about whether or not we stick with stick with insurance or we go with just like self-funded trust, right? And so just like for me, not fully understanding this despite talking about this, spending several hours going through this, and it's still being pretty unclear to me, I think that if we're asking students to vote on this, like yes, I'm always for informing them and trying to get the general population to vote and giving them that opportunity. But if I don't understand it after spending multiple hours and really understanding like what that means, I think it's not really right to be sending it to the general student body until we have like a clear-cut picture of what we're giving them and what like each option entails.
Okay. Councillor O'Connor.
Jordan O'Connor, social science counselor. I am speaking in favor of this motion. I think I sat down with Jack and Ryan to kind of wrap my head around it because I'm in women's studies. I don't really understand this. So I was kind of confused about it just as a student and what that meant for like my health and wellness. However, I think it's important just even if we are maintaining the status quo just to be able to maintain some sort of level of benefits for students. And so I am in favor of this motion. However, I do understand where some of the other counselors are coming from with not having the full information. I think personally I would like to bring this question to the students, but I would also like the to continue to advocate to get more information for us and for students as well. And I don't know who can ask this, but I would ask someone. I guess we don't really have that power to provide more information for students that when they are voting on it, they have some understanding or background on what they're voting for and what it means. I don't know what that means for you guys or what that means for anyone else, but I think that's important.
President Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I think for me, I believe I'm speaking for this motion because I always believe inherently in the student's right to choose, but also for me, I think a referendum of this nature is inherently accountability and transparency to our students and looking for ways to better educate them about the health plan itself and the benefits and kind of the situation about we're facing with the health plan itself. So we are not just making a decision as an executive of the organization, but we're going back to the student body, back to council, back to everyone so we can kind of work through this together so we can kind of explore these options so we can run positive information about what is covered in the health plan. The health plan is actually opt-outable for those who have existing coverage and like many of the different perspectives of kind of what the benefits and coverage that we have. Also that looking at letting students choose whether they want to keep their services the same or to increase as well, I think, and looking at how we let them choose and how we educate them surrounding this issue.
Councillor Stebbing.
And also, I think it must be noted that based off my understanding of it, including talking with those involved in creating the actual wording of the question itself, in the event that this goes to the student body and is passed, it does not automatically lock in the 9% increase. It merely gives council the mandate to enact up to 9% for 2 years before returning to the pre-existing cap. So I believe that we should be putting this to the student body and giving them the right to choose on their health and dental plans. But further, this still isn't going to lock us into anything that we can't get out of. This is going to just give us a mandate to do what the students think we should be doing for them.
Okay. Councillor Yee.
So speaking in favor of this motion as well, I would just like to say that this is ultimately a question that is going to students, and if they feel that they don't understand enough or that they don't support an increase, they can vote against it. And I think a lot of the opposition to this right now, to this referendum as itself, is based on the fact that there's not enough information. But I think just based on past informations that have been run, that a lot of this information comes to light during the campaign itself. That's the purpose of that 2-week period, is to educate individuals about what each option entails, about what the service in question entails, and about all the details that individuals here are concerned about. And in addition, I would just like to, bring to people's attention that this plan for some students on this campus represents the only way they can get affordable medications. For individuals who may not be as lucky as most of us to qualify under our parents' plans or to have medication and prescriptions that are covered by OHIP+, this insurance plan may literally be the only option they have to get affordable medications. So, you know, at the end of the day, students may vote to not increase it, and we may see a dip into our reserves or a cut in some of the benefits. But ultimately, if students do vote in favor of it, I do believe that students would make an educated decision based on the campaign's run. And if people feel passionate about not raising it, they are more than free to run a campaign against it.
Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Campbell speaking in favor of the motion. I'd just like to illustrate that over the summer, like, I had to use the health plan, and there's a number of like stressful impacts of even having to address that. And so if we don't give students the option to make that decision for themselves, I think that we are doing a disservice. And so I personally have felt how impactful this health plan can be in an individual's life. So I don't think it's fair for just 48 of us to decide on what we should do when it will actually significantly affect just your regular everyday student.
Proxy for Vice President Cheng.
I'll just defer my time back to the chair.
Great, thank you. Councillor Woodside.
I'm a Woodside nursing counselor. So we've talked about like what would happen in the event that the referendum passes, and I'm speaking in favor of the motion.
Thank you.
But my only concern kind of stems from, obviously, I think we should be hearing from student voices and advocating for that. But in the event that the referendum, the answer is no, that an increase is not wanted, would an increase still happen in some way despite that? Like, I understand we can go through reserves and other means, but it kind of seems like an increase is somewhat inevitable if we're going to continue to provide the services we're providing. So my only concern would be opening it up to students' voices, but then in the long run, if they didn't want it, it could still happen. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that, maybe Andrea, but.
Could I defer my speaking rights to Michaela?
Hey, okay, so basically, a little bit of clarification. So the health plan can increase up to 5% per year. 7, sorry, my apologies, based on the amendment. So it can increase up to 7% per year, and that would be brought back to council, in my understanding, for further discussion if that did not pass, if the 9% did not pass.
Councillor Sawyer. Okay. Okay, we will call to question. All those in favor of calling to question? Okay, that motion passes. Okay, polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay. Pardon? It is now 8:31. At this point, we will go back to our presentations. She's not here yet. Okay. Sorry, never mind. The presenter is still not here yet. So we will go back to our for action. Okay, so our next for action item under Governance and Finance Standing Committee, we have the standing resolutions of council. Resource members, I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Watson and Councillor Stebbing. Councillor Watson, would you like to speak to this motion? No? Councillor Stebbing, would you like to speak to this motion? No? Okay. Are there any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate. And seeing no debate, we will call to question. Sorry. You're good? Okay. No? Okay, we will call to question on this motion. And polls are now open. Still missing a few. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are now closed, and the motion passes. Okay, our next motion, bylaw 2 amendment, balloting for the student programs officer election. I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Baldwin and Councillor McCauley. Councillor Baldwin, would you like to speak to this motion?
So this motion came through Governance and Finance. We had a conversation for quite a while. We've been debating the different options regarding the SPO ballots. I know it's been quite contentious, but we ended up deciding after multiple rounds of debate that we would keep the existing system where the votes are released publicly. However, instead of a name next to each vote, there would be a unique numerical identifier that the councillor would know when they vote. So they would be able to identify their own vote because they knew their number, but nobody else would be able to identify them. We thought this gave the best opportunity for transparency because councils would be able to release their number to the public or to their faculty councils so that they could be held accountable for who they vote for if need be.
Councillor McCauley, would you like to? Okay, great. Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing no questions, we will enter a debate on this motion. And seeing, would you like to speak to this motion, Councillor Marginian? Sure, yes.
Tudor Marginian, Science Counselor. Just like the numerical identifier, I feel like it's a little bit like selectively transparent. Like people, unless they're pressured by someone, might not choose to identify themselves. How do you think, like, why do you think that this is the best way for transparency?
Councillor McCauley would like to answer that.
You're right, it is sort of selective, so this is a way to address the immediate concern that some counselors felt uncomfortable with their name being able to be posted, say, on Facebook, aligned with everyone else. But then it does still uphold that transparency, and we think it is important that you should feel accountable to your council, and if your council does request that information, there should be a mechanism for them to be able to retrieve it because you are voting on behalf of the faculty that has put you into the position. And so it does add an element of choice. You can refuse that. If you can justify that refusal to your faculty, then you have the right to sort of do that. However, we do think that it is important to have that transparency, and this enables that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson? No? Okay. Any other debate on this motion? Seeing none, we will call to question. And polls are now open. Okay, 3 to 1, polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay, our next motion to authorize voting members of council as proxies. This motion was moved by Councillor Sawyer and seconded by Councillor Huckel. Councillor Sawyer, would you like to speak to this motion? Yeah.
All right, so I hope that you all had the chance to read through this motion. It's something we passed through at our last GNF meeting. I mean, the rationale I think is explained fairly well, but in summary, it's that sometimes you can't make it to a meeting, whether that's for like a health reason, an academical reason, a family reason, whatever it might be. And as it stands, if you're not able to find someone from your faculty outside of council to come, then your constituency gets punished and it loses representation. And for some faculties where not all the members are necessarily that engaged with the USC, it can be quite challenging to find an external member to come and sit at a meeting for several hours and essentially act as a voting mechanism for their member. It's a waste of time for them. And so the point of this is that most faculties and constituencies have other representatives here already who are already supposedly voting in the same way. Like, you should be voting the same way within all of your faculties if you represent the same people in theory. So what this motion does is it allows counselors from the same faculty to proxy for each other, and this doesn't revoke any existing privileges for proxies. All it does is layer on that additional privilege so that if you're not able to find someone else, For example, an engineering counselor could proxy another engineering counselor or social sci with social sci. And so a few caveats on that are, like I said, you must be from the same faculty because that ensures that there's no conflict of interest. Your voting stances should be aligned. Secondly, you may only hold proxy for one other counselor at a time, and that means that you could only hold 2 votes at a maximum. And that's just to make sure that votes aren't all being piled on like social sci and being represented by one person, because that would be kind of ridiculous. And the other thing that we add in an amendment in our meeting is that the quorum rules still apply. So it's a little confusing, but the premise is we would still need 50% plus 1 of the physical bodies of council to be here, regardless of how many votes are being held. And that's just to prevent absenteeism so that, again, we don't have people just not showing up and proxying out their vote to someone else. The point of this motion isn't to make sure you can just proxy out your vote to someone else. The point is that if you have something that prevents you from being here, your constituency doesn't get punished. And that's why it doesn't revoke any other privileges. It's just adding this on. So I think it's a fairly simple change which accommodates councillors' needs really well. And it's a pretty pragmatic stance. So yeah.
Councillor Hukel, would you like to speak to this motion? No, okay. So we will now take questions. Councillor Van Gillen.
Juliana Van Gillen, President, Health Studies. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Vanessa. Health Studies. I like this motion. I would just like to draw attention to the fact that our particular faculty is set up.
Is this a question, sorry?
No, it's not.
Okay. Oh, I'd ask you to hold it for debate.
Apologies.
That's okay. Councillor Barroso.
Councillor Barroso, Science. I just wanted to ask how this applies to AGM, because, like, for example, myself, this past AGM I was both an incoming and an outgoing councillor. So in the event that somebody wanted to proxy their vote to me, would I be able to proxy for somebody else if I was already holding 2 votes for myself, or how does that work at AGM when there's overlapping votes for people that have incoming and outgoing positions?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So we passed a motion last year that allows people at AGM to hold 2 votes, because if you hold the incoming and outgoing seats, that's sort of the principle in place now. And the way that I intended this is that you would be able to hold votes for 1 other voting member is what it says. So I suppose what I said is that you wouldn't be able to hold more than 2 votes. At AGM, you would be able to hold 4 votes, but that would be on behalf of 2 people, because you're holding votes for 1 other voting member of council.
Sorry, can I do a quick clarification on that?
Yes.
So just for AGM, actually, AGM is odd because they're 2 separate councils. So the incoming and outgoing councils are actually separate entities that are occurring at overlapping times. And just if that makes sense in the rules of procedure. So they're not actually authorized. It's not one giant council that is authorizing individuals to have 2 votes. It's actually 2 councils that are overlapping in time and voting on the same thing.
Yeah, so yeah, didn't understand that. That's a good clarification. Fair enough. What that means then is that you'd be able to hold the vote of 1 voting member, which means like 1 member either from the incoming or outgoing councils. So 1 additional vote. So the maximum you'd be able to hold, because if you are an ingoing and outgoing member, you would have 1 vote for each of those plus 1 additional voting member vote.
Councillor Fernandez.
Cheryl Fernandez, Science Counselor. So just the third whereas, so I'm just curious to know, why assume that individuals of the same constituency will deliver the same votes?
Well, the theory behind it is that if you're elected to represent the same constituency, then you would have the same votes on a motion. And I mean, that's necessarily the case, but it is, I would say, more likely that individuals representing a single constituency would vote in the same way. And this doesn't mandate that the proxy votes the exact same way. Like, the proxy still has to vote in the way that is mandated to them by their whoever is proxying them.
Councillor Dinesi.
Along the same lines as what Councillor Fernandez was saying, it seems that a lot of the logic in this motion is sort of rooted in the fact that constituencies should be voting the same way. I think if that were the case, then, I mean, why would Science have 7 representatives sitting here if we could just have 1 with 7 times the vote? You know, so I'm curious why you think that having kind of diverse representatives isn't necessarily kind of the point of council. Like, why is it assumed that we're all voting the same way?
Joshua Hollenberg, Law Counsel, just to respond to that question, the idea isn't that there's an assumption that you're all going to vote the same way, but that you have a duty to the same constituency. And, one person with 2 votes from different constituencies would lead to conflicting loyalties where they would have a duty to vote 2 different ways potentially on an issue. This just simplifies that by maintaining those like clear lines of who has a duty to who has the responsibility to whom.
Can I ask a follow-up or no?
I'll add you back to my list. Okay. President Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a question around, like, I want some further rationale around the precedent for this, I think, because my concern lies around having individuals having double the voting power on council. So just some more clarity around the potential precedent, I think, for this motion as well, too, like what it represents for council and for our structure. I think what further thought has been put into the future of this motion, what it would look like.
Well, I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but I mean, as it stands right now, if every councillor in this room wanted to proxy their vote out to an external member, that would be allowed, right? Like, it's not like anyone in here is like limited from proxying out anyway. Like, this is just giving you more authority to who you can proxy out to. So there is at a certain point an expectation on the part of your constituents that you will be at these meetings, and that holds now, and that holds in the case that this motion passes. Like, if you're going at every meeting, you're proxying your vote out, and you're not coming to every meeting, like, your constituency should be holding you accountable for that the same way that they would now if you were to proxy your vote out to an external member every meeting. Is that what you're getting at? And that's why we have some measures in here to prevent absenteeism as well.
Can I just add to that quickly? The idea is it forms a limited precedent, right? That's why we maintain the quorum rule, so there must be 50% of the bodies of council still in this room, so that we can't have half the councillors. The idea is simply to ensure that when possible, the people who are here are more aware of how things work here, are more engaged with the issues that we're bringing to council. So basically just trying to ensure a higher quality of proxy while limiting potential for abuse or limiting the potential for people attempting to misuse the out of council duties.
Councillor O'Connor.
Jordan O'Connor, social science counselor. Just a question. If proxies have to vote the way that their person they're proxying for tells them to or would vote, I guess I don't understand why it matters if they're from the same faculty. Like if I was to ask Victoria to proxy for me as she was a science counselor, but I'm social sci. If I tell her the way I want to vote, would it matter that she's not, because she wouldn't be able to vote against my wishes anyways? Maybe I'm not understanding.
Again, the idea is that you would have potentially a situation where you would have conflicting loyalties, right? So, for example, we had a couple issues come up last year where the larger faculties were on one side and the smaller faculties were on the other side. And were you to have someone on a smaller faculty representing someone from a larger faculty, right? They would run into a situation where they could be basically they're being given the opportunity to subvert the wishes of the other counselor, and there's no way for the other counselor to remedy that situation. By keeping it within the same faculty, you're ensuring that the people were elected to represent them, and will be acting in that faculty's best interest, and just to avoid blurring those lines.
Can I clarify maybe something for you? I just don't really understand this whole proxy. So, but a proxy has to vote the way that the person they're proxying for says?
Councillor Macaulay.
They are bound to sort of do what they've been asked, but there's also new business that comes up during a meeting. So I think that's sort of what this group is getting at, is if something were to come up that weren't already discussed by the proxy and the proxier, how would that person then vote? As well as if an individual is proxying and someone requests they vote a certain way, they should follow that, but they're not legally bound to follow that. And so you would hope that they would vote the same way, but you're more insured, as Josh was just touching upon, if their interests also align with being loyal to what they've been asked. So those are the sort of conflicting issues there.
Thank you.
Watson.
Lucy Watson, health sci counselor. So first of all, I just kind of want everyone to take a step back and think about the status quo right now, because...
Is this a question, sorry?
Sorry?
Is this a question?
Can I kind of like address a lot of the questions that have been asked and to hopefully prevent other questions?
If you are asking a question, you can ask a question,
Okay, fine.
otherwise...
Can I ask a question then?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question for Councillor Sawyer. My question is, I just want to clarify my understanding of the motion, which is that basically we're not changing the status quo of people's ability to outsource their proxy to literally anyone, but to open up each councillor's ability to get someone else who's already on council to proxy for them, who is an individual that is invested and interested and informed on a lot of these matters, so, presumably. And this isn't an issue, and the issue of limitations of the council is just to ensure that any ambiguity of who is being represented by that proxy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marginian.
Theodora Marginian, science counselor. So if the concern at the heart of this motion is making sure that the constituency that you equally represented and that someone from some other faculty isn't coming in and making some different decisions as to what your constituency might need, why isn't it just easier to amend the actual proxy form to make it so that you can get anyone within your faculty only, rather than making this whole motion that get double votes? Because that's kind of one thing that bothers me about this motion.
Sorry, I'm a little unclear on the changing the proxy form versus...
So is my understanding correct that right now you can get anyone within the undergraduate kind of thing to proxy for you, making it
excluding other counselors?
Yes. Excluding other counselors. So if your concern is that your constituency needs to be represented and that the person who is voting for you represents your faculty well, could it possibly make sense, instead of doing this, to also maybe instead of that, making the proxy form or the list of your proxy would be just from your faculty? Do you know what I mean? Rather than all undergraduates.
I mean, I think that could be reasonable, but I think that's a bit of a separate issue. So that's limiting students who are external, which external students from the USC can be proxies for you. This is, I see it as kind of separate issues, being able to authorize counselors from USC and limiting who externally you can proxy. I think it's kind of a separate issue. Do
you have a question?
Can I answer the question?
Sure, yes.
I think there's a bit of a confusion. The root of this motion, the root of this motion is to address the fact that there's a concern that students who don't already sit on council wouldn't be engaged enough to replace an individual on council. So the fact that your proxy has to align with your specific constituent. A second thought to the initial motion. The original motion is just to open it up so that other counselors can proxy to enable that group of already engaged individuals to hold another voting seat, because as Councillor Sawyer initially brought up, he was afraid he couldn't find people in engineering who would want to come spend their Wednesday night here, as lovely as it is.
Councillor Yee? Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell? Okay. Councillor Fernandez? Okay. Councillor Dinesi? Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Liu?
I'm just wondering if you have power dynamics of council when talking about this. So when somebody holds 2 votes instead of 1 at a council meeting.
Fortunately, I think that councillors there's enough of us here that having 2 votes would not be sufficient sway, which is also why we ensured that the quorum rule still had to be met, so that there would not be a small number of people holding a disproportionate number of votes. The impact should be minimal, as I can tell just looking around the room that we have wonderful turnout on a monthly basis, and kudos to all of us.
Councillor O'Connor?
Sorry, I'm going back to this question about same faculty, and the reason why is just because what Celia just said about power dynamics just kind of triggered something in my mind. I think I'm concerned, and I think maybe you can speak to this, about the idea. I don't know what I'm trying to ask. Sorry, let me say, I vote as counselors not just based on our constituency, but also on the students we represent. So For example, I don't just represent social science students, I represent students on all sorts of issues, so LGBTQ rights, or we just had a debate about birth control, so female students, for example. My concern is I don't understand how, if you could explain why having someone on your same faculty vote for you means that they would be more likely to vote on the same side of you in issues when they could have other biases. So someone else that I feel could better represent my opinions on certain issues, who is not me, could better represent students. I just can't grasp it.
And that's fair, but I think any proxy that you bring in is going to bring other biases with them. Like, this is just sort of taking out like one layer of bias, which is that you're in the same faculty as the person. And you are by no means compelled to proxy another counselor. This is like an additional privilege. You could still go out and, if you found someone else that you knew who represented the interests of the students that you feel you represent better, then you would still be free to have them be your proxy as well. So it's not removing any of the original proxy rights. It's just sort of adding on an additional privilege. If you feel like the other, for example, the other engineering counselors or the other social science counselors be more engaged, have a better understanding, and represent your constituency better than having an external individual, then you have that ability now.
Councillor Watson.
Can I also just kind of add on to what Councillor Sawyer was responding to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Also, I think that sorts of questions are sort of getting off topic in terms of like problems that individuals have with like the current proxy system in general. And I think the spirit of this the intent of this actual motion is just to allow like someone else on council to represent you instead of limiting that factor. And there are a few other things in place that we put in to like try and avoid some levels of buffer. But I think if you have a problem with like the actual idea of proxies or the current state of that in general, like that's a different motion and a completely separate topic. And I think that I would appreciate if we spent our time talking about the merits of this actual motion in terms of what it is.
So I think at this point we'll move into debate. So speaking for and against, Councillor.
So speaking against this motion, I understand a lot of the concerns that are brought up by individuals who are in favor of it. So mainly looking at the fact that we want someone who knows enough about the USC in order to represent it, in order to vote properly on behalf of their constituents. Looking at the fact that we want constituents to be properly represented, was picking random people, and that in some cases certain faculty have a hard time choosing individuals to proxy for them who are not other counselors. But for me, I think that a lot of these issues and why we bring up about amending the proxy forms, to limit it to a certain faculty. We're talking about this because I think these are more practical solutions. You just go into the idea of an individual having 2 votes and the potential power dynamic that could come from that. I would just like to bring everyone back to a year ago from today when we had the Radio Western debate on this council floor and 2 motions literally died because of a 1 vote difference. And if an individual had 2 and they cast those 2 votes for one side, that 1 by 1, then essentially you are giving that individual a lot more power than everyone else on this council floor. So again, looking at the issues of the fact that if certain faculties can't find proxies because everyone's busy, right? But I think that looking at other faculties like FAM, this motion does nothing to help because most of them only have 1 representative on this council. Looking at the fact that I think a lot of constituents are not homogenous. Really, speaking on behalf of science here, we are a big faculty, the biggest and baddest, sorry Jared, but looking at the fact that we represent many different diverse programs, different diverse populations that not necessarily, we don't all together, right? So for a lot of us, this is not a concern. So yeah, again, I do want to really emphasize the idea of that power dynamic of giving someone 2 votes and the fact that this could be addressed in other ways.
Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Campbell speaking against this motion. To echo the statements that were made previously, I do think that if we give one individual 2 votes, that goes against the equality that this council is built upon. I feel proud to be on this council because I know that regardless who is voting, whether you're a president of your faculty, whether you're the student president of Western, count the same. I think that it's extremely important that it stays that way. Secondly, social science does not vote the same way all the time. We have a very diverse student population, and I don't think that we should be expected to vote the same way. And then thirdly, this hasn't really been brought up, but I do believe that at times the USC can be and so like some students don't know what's going on, and you may hear it from the Gazette or you may hear it like within council, but sometimes it can be like an exclusive group. And I think that if we were to have this motion, it would further close the doors to individuals, because potentially you would just go to other councillors to sit on council rather than going to asking if younger members or other individuals who would hopefully want to get involved wanted to sit and learn the experience. And so for those 3 reasons, I will be voting against this motion.
Councillor Van Galen.
Juliana Van Galen, Health Studies President. I would just like to echo the sentiments of the other 2 people who have previously spoken, that our faculty also does not always vote similarly. We tend to, just because we are based on health. But
are you sorry, for or against?
Hot take. No. I had to think for a sec. I'm sorry. I would actually like to speak in favor of this motion. Okay. But the reason I would just like to draw attention to the fact that there are different sentiments, and I don't think that limiting it to the faculty is like the best solution. But I do saying if I wasn't able to show up, for example, one of our counselors was not able to show up today because he couldn't find someone, and that's not on him. But if this motion were to go through, for example, we would have his vote be present. So I do see the merits of it. However, I do think there may be elements in place in further motions, for example, to fix this one, that address the issues of the exclusivity of the USC Council. That was a fantastic point, and I thank you for that. But yeah, in the spirit of the motion, I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Councillor Woodstock.
Nursing counselor / nursing president, if we're going to say association presidents too. Basically everything that I was going to say has been said, but also just to add on, I would rather have my voice be represented by a separate proxy that doesn't already sit on council. Again, it's adding more diverse opinions. If you take into account if, 5 people had a proxy from an already existing counselor, then you're just losing opinions in general. So I'd rather keep all of the debate more diverse in the first place, and I think that's just another point to add on.
Okay, Councillor Fiaz. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hollenberg.
Thank you, Joshua Hollenberg, Law Counselor. So I'm not an engineer, but I'm going to pretend to be one for a half second. Currently, if one of you needs to miss a council meeting and you need a proxy, the population that you can select from is X, where X is everyone who is an undergraduate student minus the 45 or so people who are sitting on council. All this does is increase that population to X plus 1 is the other people who are in your council. And you can tell why I'm in law school and not making money as an engineer. So all it does is increase that number marginally by the number of people who are in your who are your co-counselors for your thank you. Sorry. You are not required to select another counselor. You are not required to select anybody. You can just not come and express regrets, right? You are not required to select someone who may have differing opinions from you. If you're, Councillor Connor, if you're worried about a set of opinions, you can select someone who shares those opinions. The only difference is that that person cannot be Councillor Campbell, whereas before it couldn't. So the idea here is not to limit debate. It's not designed to limit opinions. It's not designed to limit who you can select. It's merely designed to give you a wider range of people. So choice between missing some other engagement or having your regrets because you couldn't find a proxy, it just gives you a couple more people that you can rely on because you know they're going to be here, you know how they feel about these things, and you can select someone who's going to adequately represent who you are. And so for that reason, I strongly encourage everyone just to give yourself and your co-counselors a little bit more flexibility.
Councillor Teja?
Inam Teja, Huron President. I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Hollenberg was saying, and I think it's important
important to recognize that this does not change the fact that we don't need to vote in blocks as a council. It seems like that's a bit of a concern around the room. This is basically maintaining the status quo, ensuring that everyone can find a proxy in a different constituent, while simply adding the ability in a last minute scenario in case you need to find someone and you're unable to find someone else, that you can get someone who you know is going. I think this is a fairly straightforward vote yes from us.
Okay, Councillor Watson.
I just think that it's kind of in bad faith to assume that councillors are going to choose other councillors to proxy for them at the table for whatever kind of like power struggle. I think that this is in the event that, I don't know, one person cannot make it because they have an exam or some other obligation that they can't come to the council meeting, and so they can, who's informed and like on council, saying, who hopefully like in good faith like will choose someone who has similar views or would vote similarly or the same way as they would, and allow them to like vote in a way that aligns with your vote. I think it's in really bad faith to say, oh, is this going to be some kind of power struggle and all the votes are going to go to one person. Also, equally, in the math here, like supposedly you're going to give someone your vote who you think is going to vote in the same way as you, and I think that it doesn't matter whether or not you're both there or one person's there. I think that the vote outcome is going to be the same. And also, just speaking about like the smaller faculties, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this hinders smaller faculties at all. It just allows slightly more options for to help them find a proxy and have someone at the table for them.
Councillor Marginian.
Tidar Marginian, Science Councillor. I would like to vote. I would like to speak against this motion. First of all, I don't think that we should be undervaluing the importance of having like two different persons saying that it's better to have just one person voting for two. I understand that you're saying we can go out and get someone from the public if we want to vote for us, but I think that's idealistic to say that people are going to try to find someone else first before resorting to choosing another counselor. I think that it's more first resort for someone, in which case we might be seeing that a lot more than people from coming externally to our meetings, and that might cause some problems for like student engagement. I don't know, for me, like being able to proxy for a meeting when I was in first year really encouraged me to come on to student government. It was just that one meeting, right, where I just got an counselor and called it quits. So I think that's important. And another thing I want to say is just because most motions pass with like 90%, you know, especially if they're just little changes to certain policies or whatever, that doesn't mean that all motions pass with 90%. There are some that, like I mentioned before, one vote can be crucial to deciding what happens with that motion. So in that case, that person wouldn't necessarily be voting in a certain way. Let's say that they were to represent you and vote twice. That person wouldn't be representing you in a certain way to, you know, cause power dynamic struggle thing. They would just be voting that way because that's genuinely how they feel, right? So let's say that they were voting against Radio Western, their opinion would have twice as much power because that's how they feel about the motion. And that could be a deciding factor in important motions to come in the future. That's all I'd like to say.
Okay. Councillor Sawyer.
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of different issues on the table, and I'll try to address a couple of them here. So the first is regarding this issue of 2 votes for one person, and I understand that's kind of a principled stance, right? Like, there is kind of a principled stance in a lot of government, 2 votes. What I'm proposing here is more of a pragmatic approach. So looking at this logistically from the perspective of students who are very busy, who have things come up last minute, who can't always control their schedules perfectly, I'm proposing that we take a pragmatic stance on this and that we give ourselves more flexibility and more room to accommodate ourselves for the changes that happen last minute in our lives. That's a principle, and if you disagree with that, that's just something you believe. I don't think there's really anything anyone can do to change that. I'm just asking you to take a pragmatic stance and think about what is easier for your life and for the lives of other counselors, and consider that for some people this is more challenging than others, and so obviously this is going to benefit some faculties and some individuals more than others, but at the end of the day, view at least, and you may disagree, is that this doesn't actually hurt anyone. All it does is it helps some faculties and their counselors. So that's the first point. And the second is regarding this power struggle, and I don't want to talk about this too much. I think Lucy did a great job discussing this. I think it's really unfair to assume the worst in people and assume to leverage the second vote and not vote the way they were asked to as a proxy, and they're just going to use that to, monopolize the meeting somehow. This is 2 votes out of 45 versus 1 vote in 45, and I understand there are some very close votes, but I really think that's assuming the worst in people, and so besides the point.
Okay. Councillor Raja?
One more. I also wanted to touch on the point, I feel like I raised some ire, assuming that all faculties would vote together. That's bad on me, fair assumption. I didn't, honestly, that's fair. So regardless of whether or not faculties vote together, though, as Josh pointed out, you do generally have a duty to, that means you vote the same way all the time. You may not, but you have a general duty to the same constituency. So the reason that is in place is because it provides another mechanism to try and make sure that the proxy will vote in the best interest of the same constituencies. And so I understand there are personal layers that go onto that, but like I said before, this takes away one of the layers in that you do. So again, apologies for that assumption I made. And the last point is on the exclusivity of USC. Really quickly, I don't think the purpose of the proxy policy is to increase student engagement. I understand that may be a nice side effect, but the point of the proxy policy is to enable better and more effective and more efficient meetings with better discussion. I don't think that when we're discussing our proxy policy, we should necessarily be discussing that as a means of increasing student engagement, although that would be, it could be a nice side effect. I think it's more important that we use this to increase accommodation and flexibility for our counselors.
Councillor Raja.
Yeah, Ashiana Raja, social science motion. Councillor Sawyer just kind of said it all, but I just want to add that when I proxied last year, I had no idea what was going on, no idea how to vote, no idea the thought that goes behind these motions, and I didn't even know there were standing committees. So, I mean, I like the option of just having someone who's knowledgeable vote for me. That's it.
Councillor Fernandez.
Cheryl Fernandez, science counselor. Speaking against this motion, firstly, I don't think that this has been a reoccurring issue, especially because that there's a huge population elect to get a proxy from. And it's unfair to allow one individual 2 votes, just like how Frank said that every vote makes a difference. And if the concern is allowing someone that does not have experience to be on council floor, then there's always resource members that don't have voting rights. So I just don't think it's been a reoccurring issue that we have to make this change.
Councillor Kamenetsky.
Councillor Kempler, I think exclusivity is just another way to say elected representatives. Are
you for or against?
I'm sorry, speaking for this motion.
Thank you.
I'm not really sure why we feel comfortable, or if our constituents feel comfortable giving a vote to an individual that would have a vote that holds the same weight as one of us who is naturally, if this motion passes through, I would absolutely be in favor of deferring my vote to a fellow social science counselor, based on just echoing what Councillor Raja said. Everything that she said, I completely agree with. So.
Okay, Councillor Murray.
Can we call this a question, please?
Yes. All those in favor of calling to question? Okay, that motion passes. We will call to question on this motion. Polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are now closed, and the motion passes. Okay, we will now go back to our presentations. Sorry? Okay, everyone, settle down. We have our second presentation this evening from the AVP Student Experience. The presentation will be 15 minutes long with a 5-minute Q&A. Whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Okay, well, hi folks. I'm Jenny Massey. I'm the Student Experience here at Western, and I've been here now for approximately 3 months. Super excited to be joining you and really glad for the opportunity to chat with you today a little bit about some of the changes that are underway in the Student Experience portfolio and to answer your questions and just talk with you a little bit about some of the graduate and undergraduate students here at Western. So for those of you that don't know, the Student Experience portfolio was established at Western in 2014. And the intention of that work really was to ensure that there was a senior leader in the administration intentionally focused on cultivating the best student experience in Canada. And since that work was initiated in 2014, lots of different changes have occurred in terms of aligning the portfolio. And my hire, of course, is the most recent fabulous decision that the institution has made. Student affairs right across North America and some experience in Europe, originally from England, the other London. That's how I like to fondly refer to it now, the other London. And my work is really situated in what we understand now as integrated student learning. So thinking about how we can harness opportunities, the engagement, and integrate that into curricular and co-curricular experiences. Importantly, the work that we're doing is aligned around student thriving. And I want to chat with you just a little bit about the reason we've adopted that approach, and then answer any questions you might have about what that the implications that might have for students. What we know from conversations with and recent North America is that both at the graduate and undergraduate level, we often hear from students that they're surviving post-secondary education. And that's a point of concern. And we particularly see that in discussions around mental health and wellness on campus. I'm sure that many of you have been involved in discussions here at Western about the work that needs to happen to enhance student well-being. And so we're really intentionally realigning our programs, resources, and supports to address that in a very intentional way. So the research on student thriving really stems from some of the research that's been done on flourishing. Flourishing research focused on adults. Thriving research takes that and applies to education students. What we know from that research is that there are 3 broad components that universities and colleges can invest in, right, in order to empower students to thrive. So things that are important are things like attitudes. This is like psychological attributes, as well as this is where we sometimes think about student engagement. We often use student engagement as a measure, as a tool, and then student success. The research really points to things like student learning and graduation rates. I'm actually really interested in also integrating that into career happiness to think about the outcomes of the undergraduate student experience. Students are engaged in the learning process, right? They invest time and effort to succeed. They manage their time effectively, and they just are really thoroughly enjoying their time on campus. I bet you if I went around this table here, you would all be able to give examples of a time when you really felt like you were just rocking your undergraduate experience. Right? Perhaps this was a society that just really was fulfilling for you. Maybe you were taking a course that you just were able to sort of see yourself in the course material. Maybe it's because you had deep friendships or connections through the residences that sort of transformed that part of your undergraduate experience. I think what we want to do here at Western is ensure that students are experiencing deep, meaningful moments more frequently. They're experiencing them more deeply, and they're having them more frequently. What's so exciting for me about the research in student thriving is it takes a lot of the approach that post-secondary education institutions have adopted previously and turns it inside out. So some of you are probably really familiar with conference campuses that focus on here are all the reasons why students aren't successful, right? And embedded in that is a little bit of a narrative of blame, right? So they're not successful because insert attribute. What the thriving approach does is it takes that in and turns it inside out, and it says, what should post-secondary administrators do, what are the kinds of environments that they should be fostering, what are the supports that they should be investing in order to create environments in which all students can thrive. And we know there are 5 key components. So engaged learning. This is when students are able to connect what they're learning inside the classroom to experiences that happen outside of the classroom. A lot of the conversation we're having at Western right now around experiential learning would be situated really important. The second is diverse citizenship, right? I would imagine if I ran the thriving quotient on you today, many of you on here would score really, really highly in diverse citizenship. These are students that have high levels of diverse citizenship. They see themselves as making a difference in the world around them, and they're interested in hearing and learning about the way in which other people can talk about knowledge. Social connectedness, right? I often use orientation as one of our key examples, but it's also residences, clubs and societies. This social connectedness, this is where students have friendships, mentors, peers, people that they can turn to and that invest in their lives during their journeys on campus. Academic determination, students are able to connect short-term and long-term goals. So you can ask a student, what does the future look like for you? And they're able to give you some pretty good examples. So things like academic advising, career advising, from an appreciative standpoint, becomes really important in this area. And the last is positive perspective. Okay? This is where students are happy. They encounter a setback and they're able to bounce back from that. So, sometimes one of my responsibilities is to oversee the student code of conduct, and it's not unusual for, the most serious cases, a student have to come into my office. They usually look really terrified, and I like to begin the conversation with, there are very few things that you can do that we're going to bounce you out of here. It's all about how you approach the situation. And I think that becomes a really important part of that conversation, because university is a time where we learn, we try, we fail, and we become better people because of that. So I just explained what they all were. There we go. So what's really important, I think, from a thriving, we turn the conversation from a deficit. So we want to understand not only what are some of the barriers that students experience, but what are the attributes that they bring? Right? What are some of the attributes they bring to our campus, and how can we harness those strengths in order to help them succeed? So it's a very much, and we can adopt this both at the graduate and undergraduate level. We use this in things like our academic advising or career advising. We use this whenever students might experience a setback. And we actually, for many of you may have already participated in something like the Gallup Strength Finder. That's actually an instrument that we can use for a strengths-based educational approach to students. Sorry, I put all these slides in. I remembered I only had 15 minutes. So at the bottom of this, right, is the question is, am I good enough? We hear this from students all of the time, and I'm sure that many of you hear this too. Right? Is this real concern of inferiority complex, imposter syndrome? We hear this particularly from some of our new students. And the thriving approach helps us really articulate to students that you've made a great choice to come to Western. Right? You belong here, we're excited that you're here, and we're confident that you can succeed at our institution. Ultimately, it's about building resilience. The thriving approach suggests what we're looking for is a thriving campus, right? It's a community network, members of the community working in the same direction to mitigate mental health crisis and enhance students' empowerment throughout their entire journey. We're building resilience. Okay, so those are the 5 elements of thriving. So overall, our vision is to have more students to be thriving more often, proactive in terms of our efforts, but also we need to broaden our responsive care solutions to ensure that students who need additional help and support receive the appropriate care in a timely fashion. And so some of you may know we've been trying some new things in recent months and years. And so the University of $1 into the renovation of Thames Hall. This very exciting construction on Thames Hall will begin early in 2019, and it will emerge as a fully integrated health and wellness center. So we're taking our health services and our psychological services and moving them into an integrated health and wellness center because we heard from students that navigating and now having one floor that students can go to and receive various types of support and help should streamline that process. We've also invested significant amount of money in streamlining our mental health records and our record systems. So we have a shared electronic record system. So when you go and that's actually in practice right now. So when you go and see a doctor one day, they're going to know already. You don't have to tell your story again. And I think one of the most exciting initiatives is we rolled out a responsive care approach to mental health. We just rolled out that new approach, the most recent version of that this September. This stems from a stepped care approach which was developed at Memorial University. Responsive care is Western. An indication of the impact that that's having on campus. This time, in November, 3 years ago, before we moved in this direction, we had between 350 and 400 students on a wait list to see a mental health professional. That effectively means they can't get in for the rest of the academic year because we can't clear that backlog. Now you'll see it within a week, and most of the time, if you're in crisis, we'll get you in that same day. So we're able to actually triage students and ensure that those with the highest need are receiving the highest levels of care. We're able to build better partnerships and collaborations with the City of London, referring students into community-based programs where necessary, and also in resources on campus that will help them. Sometimes seeing a psychologist isn't the right answer, right? It's not what students need. It could be a peer support. It could be career advising. Right? There can be many things that are causing that kind of stress and anxiety. Keeping them on a wait list for 6 to 8 months means that we're not able to nip this before it becomes a crisis. We've been spending a considerable amount of time and energy really over the last few years piloting, testing, trying different things. And now is our time to stabilize some of those practices, those best practices that we've cultivated and refined. We've rolled a lot of this pilot project out using donor money and a Ministry of Housing is coming to an end. And so we've reached out to the Student Services Committee to discuss a fee increase to help stabilize some of these projects. So the fee increase is just under $12 per student. The Provost has committed to match every dollar for dollar. So a $12 per student investment, $24 investment into the student thriving model. And so we wanted to bring it to you as a heads up that this is the conversation we're heading down. And I would welcome your comments, questions, suggestions. You can put forward one.
Yep, we have 5 minutes allotted for questions, starting with Councillor Hollenberg.
So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming and for sharing this information with us, especially kind of how these services have been transitioning over the last few years. It's exciting to see that this is happening. I just have two kind of quick questions. The first is, what do you see as your success metrics? I realize that it might feel somewhat insensitive to ask that when it comes to issues like mental health, but just in terms of on a dollar-for-dollar basis, when student fees are going up, it's I'd like just to hear a bit about how you plan to measure those things.
Yeah. So first of all, let me say I don't think it's an insensitive question at all, and I appreciate you referring to that. There's a few different ways that we'll be measuring this. We're rolling out the Student Experience Strategic Plan, which is based upon thriving, so this will be incorporated throughout the entire approach to the work that we're doing. And integrated into that is a 3-year assessment cycle. And one of the measures that will be thriving quotient, which actually measures the extent to which students are thriving on campus, and it's a metrics of all 5 of those models. So we will be running that hopefully early in 2019. I'm trying to get some peer institutions to sign on to run it at the same time so we can benchmark. On another year, we'll be running the college mental health assessment. Another key metric will be improving, but importantly, one of the other growing trends. Right? Student populations change over time, and the kinds of pressures that we see today are going to look a little bit differently 5 or 6 years from now, and so we need to be monitoring that and be ready to respond. I think 5 years ago, we wouldn't have anticipated cannabis on campus, right? So we need to be ready to be monitoring and watching those changes, to be ready on an annual cycle, a campus climate study, so that we can identify, quantify, measure over time how different constituents of our campus, student population experience campus, and ensure that we're approaching everything that we're doing from an equity and diversity lens.
Councillor Marginian.
Tutor Marginian Science Counselor, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm so happy to hear that Western's really prioritizing student success and student thriving, not just in times of crisis, but also in times of, when we're doing well, helping us do even better. I have 2 questions. I'd just like to know this new renovation of Thames Hall. I've read a few articles, and it seems like, like the triage system and crisis responsive team is happening. Where else is the money going? Just so I kind of know as a student myself, what resources are going to be incorporated. And my second question,
okay, I'll do one at a time, then I won't
Okay.
forget your question.
Okay, great.
So a couple of things. First of all, I think that your question's well taken, and I'm grateful for it for a few reasons. One, I think the investment in Thames Hall is incredibly important, and it really situates Western as leading in the country, and I think we should congratulate the institution on making such an experience. Having said that, the renovation of Thames Hall is not going to fix the mental health problem that we have amongst our undergraduate student population and our graduate student population, and it's not a problem for Western, it's a problem right across the country. So what's exciting about Thriving is it doesn't point the finger at Thames Hall as the solution. It says that this is a climate matter, it's really a societal issue, but all elements of the student experience will be working hard to ensure that we are actually mitigating student mental health crisis. And so to give you specific answers on where the funding will go, I can tell you specific positions that the money will be channeled into. We'll be creating a coordinator of student thriving, direct money onto this activity. We will solidify the gender violence and sexual violence educator. That's a position that's been running on campus now for a couple of years. It's ministry funded, so it takes that position and it provides continuing funding for that. We will be hiring a master's level, an important part of our triage process, and also 2 triage counsellors. All 3 of those positions, again, we currently have on staff, but they're funded through external dollars that have been great in terms of transitioning us, but now we need to actually make them part of our mental health ecosystem. We'll be moving forward with stabilizing the wellness. To have a lot of support with students, but we also need to tell them what's available, and we need to recognize that students are increasingly living digitally, and so the more we can take some of our programming and actually migrate that to various other platforms that students can access 24/7, all the better. We have currently 1 case manager at Western, which is concerning. We would typically see several more. And so I'm interested in establishing a crisis center on campus. That is part of the mental health strategic plan. It points out that to be really important. With extended hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., the case manager would be part of that. That investment's not enough to get there. The university has other funding to help us get there in terms of base positions. And I'm in conversations right now with an external donor to make up the shortfall. So assuming all those things come together, we'll be looking to open that by the fall. And then the 2 other positions that will be finalized and established during this is a transitions advisor and strengths coach during the transition to campus and make the most of that journey. And then an academic success program. This is students that find a program coordinator to support students that find themselves in academic difficulty, bounce back before it becomes a real crisis.
So that's actually the end of our question time that is allotted. I do have a few people still on my list for questions. Our question time, Councillor Dinesi, by how long? Okay, I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Marginian, all those in favor of extending for 5 more minutes of questions?
I feel quite flattered.
Okay, that passes. Councillor Marginian, did you want to ask your next question?
So here that the depth of like the services offered is increasing because it's important to not just have one of the same kind of role, general roles. It's important to have specialized roles. So on that note, one of the things that sitting on the LGBTQ plus student issue subcommittee we're a little bit concerned about is the fact that as of right now, a psychological counselor that is LGBTQ plus specific, as in I bet she can deal with other issues as well, but she is able to field students who have these specific concerns. So, and she's only part-time, once a week, and after she leaves, there's no one in her place. How will the depth of services for psych services increase to make sure that these specialized needs are attended to as well? Not just LGBTQ+, but various other things.
Yeah, your point's well taken. And this is not going to resolve every challenge that we have on campus, but it's going to move it's going to move us in the right way of the part-time counselor that we have with an expertise in LGBTQ+ mental health support, which we know from the literature is a critically important area. And students, the students are they're at higher risk of mental health concerns for a variety of complex societal reasons. I'm interested in exploring extending resources right now to do that. What we do have, but through investing in this, is we'll be able to ease pressure off of that individual who is also seeing other folks, right? And so freeing up their time to be able to be focused more in their area of expertise. The same would be true for a counsellor that has expertise in supporting international students. By investing in this, what we're doing is we're not investing at this stage, although I would like to in the future, more resources in that specific area, we're able to free up some of their time so they can spend more time focused in their area of expertise.
Councillor Couillard.
Hello? Okay. I'm Ankula from the Arts and Humanities faculty. I just had a question about, you had mentioned wait times being at a week, or if it was urgent, a same-day appointment. Recently, students from my constituent had come to the services website. It says that during peak times in the school year, there can be up to a 3 to 4 month wait to get an appointment for counseling and psychiatric care. So I was wondering if that was referring to the same services or if that's a different area.
Yeah, I need to check the website. One of the goals of the new review and ensure they're streamlined and up to date. So I don't know exactly what that particular piece of data is looking at, but I can tell you I pulled the most recent figures last week from our psych services, and this was the information that we had. Those wait times have been going down over the last little while as we have been rolling out responsive care. I suspect that the data you're referring to is from
Peter Dinesi, science counselor. So a lot of the sort of things you talked about are stuff happening outside of the classroom, but I think it's sort of fair to say that what happens inside the classroom in terms of setting students up to thrive is probably important to consider. So is there some sort of plan of sort of setting students up to thrive beyond the classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to recognize that my role sits at Dean's Council, and that was an intentional decision by the institution. I'm having regular conversations with all of the deans and the associate deans around the work that we're doing. I'll say that it's been met with great support, actually, and an eagerness of this content into the day-to-day practices that happen inside the academic units. That will take time. That's not going to happen quickly, but it's important work, and I think we'll see incremental progress for sure. Yeah, I share your desire for integrated learning, absolutely.
Councillor Macaulay.
I was wondering if the USC Foundation has been brought into any of these conversations, because that is sort of a funding avenue, and if that's been explored to help reduce the burden that will go on students with this fee increase, and whether any funds are being allocated from that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, of course, the USC Foundation is fairly developed with this proposal. And also just the thriving approach more broadly. We've been heavily engaged in discussions with the USC and with SOGS, and so they've been very supportive of the content and offering quite a bit of strategic direction actually in terms of the content and the direction that we've taken. So it's been a very collaborative process. The rollout of the USC Foundation. I mean, I think both sides, as far as I can tell, are open to discussion on that.
Okay, great. That is the end of our extended time. Unless anyone would like to motion more, I think we should probably move on. Thank you very much for your time and coming to speak to us. Okay, we will now return to the for action section. So, motion for amendment to bylaw 1. I will look for a mover and a Councillor Fernandez. And a seconder, Councillor Watson. Okay. Councillor Fernandez, would you like to speak to this motion? Councillor Watson, would you like to speak to this motion? No? Okay. Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will end. Yeah. Councillor Marginian.
This is the doc on the Google Drive, right? It's like only 3 pages long. I'm on the right page.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know, because it's been crossed off like 46 members of council. So does that mean that we don't like to understand why it's crossed out? Is there like no upper limit now to council, or is there a different limit, or like what is the case?
Keaton Olson, would you like to speak to that?
I just want to understand it.
To Keaton Olson, the Associate Governance. So I can definitely offer some background to that. But if the upper limit, this is going to be read in tandem with the changes that are going to be made to the council composition procedure, which outlines an extra councillor per every 1,000 students in a faculty or affiliate without an upper limit as it is now, or a set limit at that.
Okay, any other questions?
Maybe just as a general point, can you just sort of clarify what this motion is? Because I think some people are confused with the numbers here versus the formula motion and stuff like that.
Updates. So just to give some backstory, these bylaw 1 changes were successfully passed during the AGM last year, but like some other motions as we've gone through, or sorry, policies and bylaws, they were incorrectly updated when the governance manual was passed. But the purpose of this was to get rid of the set schedule as well as the limit of 46 councillors and to let it work with the new model with extra representation per every 1,000 councillors.
Okay. Andrea would also like to.
Just another clarification. So what actually happened during the AGM is that the outgoing.
No, I don't think.
Okay. No, okay, that makes sense. So what happened during the AGM is that the outgoing council voted on this council composition motion that was in committee last year. Unfortunately, that is out of order because a council cannot vote for a motion that does not affect their council. It has to be within the year of the council affected, and since it would take place during this election year, last year's council voting for that makes it out of order, which is why, in the spirit of what last year's put it on the agenda to repass and for you to decide whether that's something you'd like to do. So it is actually a motion that was passed by last year's council during AGM. I'm not sure if some of you were kind of listening to that portion of it, but yep, and so it's now just on the agenda to be repassed. So just to clarify that, it's not a new, but the council composition new numbers are updated based on this year's estimates for now, like this year's estimates, because we got the new enrollment numbers and we created new estimates based on that.
Councillor Marginian.
TRM are saying that the schedule has been changed or whatever, so it's been crossed out here that it'll be reviewed every 2 years. When will it be reviewed now?
So you're asking under the new council composition procedure how often will it be reviewed? How it reads in that motion, it's going to be every year.
Councillor Yee.
So with the looking at the increase for medicine, is medicine only the MD students and not the BMSC students are put under science, correct? Students are technically in the faculty, but we're represented by science student governments. I just want to make sure like that clarification is in this composition.
Do you have a clarification on that?
Yeah, so Bachelor of Medical Sciences, even though we're in Schulich, technically we are represented in every other measure by Faculty of Science. Would we be able to amend this and pass?
There's just questions right now.
Can I have a follow-up?
A follow-up question, yeah.
Would we be able to amend that right now, like on this document too? Or else wouldn't we have to go back and change it anyways?
No, this just allows but bylaw 1 itself won't actually have the schedule itself.
So like I'm referring like the chart, I'm referring to like the chart itself. That can be changed, right? Like without having to come back to council and vote. Okay.
Councillor.
Vanessa Casey, Health Science President. I just have a question. Andrea, you said that the numbers are based on like this year's enrollment, but in the Google document that like was sent out in the Facebook group, it says like, based on November 1st, 2017-18 numbers. So is that like, shouldn't it be changed, increased?
From my understanding, these are we can just amend it to say the 2017-18 numbers. But I believe, Keaton, that the numbers you got are changed. Can you
double check that?
I double checked earlier actually, and they are like the 2017-18 numbers. Like those are 17-18. No, but she said that it was based on this year's numbers, but like technically it's not. So I was wondering if like we do have those numbers we could update.
Can you use the microphone? It's, thank you.
There should be an amendment in the Facebook group which uses the updated numbers as of November 1st, 2017.
That's what I was asked. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, shouldn't there be numbers for like this year's enrollment, like 2008? Okay.
Any other questions regarding this motion? Okay, Councillor Zanesi?
I could be wrong, but I think what we're on the screen and what's reflected in the agenda, and I think that might be confusing some people. Like motion 4 in the updated agenda you sent out today doesn't have that written there, does it? Motion 4 says motion to amend the council composition procedure. And that says appendix.
Because this was changed in council, so it's not actually reflected in the updated agenda, which was sent out yesterday, and this was changed today. Okay? So it's actually in your agenda, it's actually motion 2 in the consent agenda. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we will enter debate on this motion. Seeing no debate, we will call to question. Polls are now open. Three, two, one. Polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay, on to our next motion, the motion to amend the council composition procedure, which is the agenda. Okay, I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Stebbing and a seconder, Councillor Ma. Okay, Councillor Stebbing, would you like to speak to this motion?
So as was said, an error on the part of the previous council, it was not passed. This just moves towards a more representative council by restructuring it so that the seats are proportional to the student body. I can't see that being incredibly controversial.
Point of clarification, what's the difference between this motion and what we just previously talked?
Hello. The motion we just talked about was specifically for bylaw 1. So in order to make these changes happen, bylaw 1 needs to be changed before. And now underneath the new bylaw 1 structure, the council comp can be changed.
Stebbing, Councillor Ma, would you like to speak to this motion?
Charles Ma, social science counselor. So just on top of what Jack just mentioned, we've had a lot of activations, especially for social science, because we had a lot of seats, and we sometimes couldn't find enough people to run for it and take the position as seriously as possible to make sure that people are best represented. We want to make sure that the best qualified people who take the job seriously are in as well. So this is also a way to sort of get rid of.
Any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Danesi?
So based on the appendix that's actually in the motion, those numbers aren't correct. The correct numbers would be kind of the spreadsheet that was posted in the Facebook group earlier today. Is that the idea? Okay. Maybe just say that in the future, using Google Docs as motions might not be a good idea because they can be edited by anyone. I'm just...
Okay. Any other questions regarding this motion? Councillor O'Connor?
Hi, sorry, I'm confused about what the question was just asked. Are we not supposed to be looking at the document in this motion? Was there a document that was uploaded?
President Pratt, are you?
Could I motion for a 5-minute recess as we figure out any clerical errors in association with this motion?
Yes, all those in favor of 5-minute recess? Okay, that passes. Yeah, go.
This is undersized. So I'm in this program.
Yeah. Because right now they have events.
Yeah, so it should be
How they count it? Okay.
Yeah, so like it's confusing because we're trying, like my ITR says true instruments and dentistry, but for all other purposes, I am represented in every capacity by the faculty.
Okay.
to maintain the services that are needed. You can't keep paying for services that, as inflation goes up, you still can't cover all the people who need coverage at the same amount of money. Like, I get where he's coming from. Then things have to get cut. That's just how it works. Unless he is correct that there is some like shady, unnecessary spending, but I don't think that's the impression. I don't think that's the case. He's making a very fair point.
He's like spending that engagement with her. I don't think
no, they're an insurance company.
Oh, insurance companies are shit
Insurance
in general.
company,
They, like,
insurance,
they all suck.
and they're a business, and we're using them as a business.
Sorry, my bad. I said this year. It was the numbers that we got this year from last year. It's the most they take the numbers on like after dropouts and stuff. So right now, like numbers change for the end of the year. I get no November 1st of last year. Every year we update it based on. I'm just gonna be mentioning. It's also been a very hectic night.
No problem.
This honestly makes everything so crazy. Oh wait, what? The Western English Language Center has a vote? Has like a seat?
Okay, so one from each association.
I doubt our enrollment will ever be below what it is now. Like below.
Is business considered money?
Why they don't have Wait, are you talking Ivy has 2,000 people? Actually, that makes a lot of sense. There's like 8 people in first year Ivy. There's 75 people in each section. Yeah, that's probably true.
Please take a seat. In the Facebook group. So if everyone just wants to take a look at that, that is what we are currently debating. Okay. I'll just give you a minute. Okay, are there any questions regarding this motion? Councillor O'Casey.
Vanessa O'Casey, Health Science. Why there's a seat for English Language Center? I just want to know like the rationale behind that. Someone could answer that.
Keaton.
So last year there was a working group underneath the Governance and Finance Standing Committee that I chaired onto the council. And that is that the Western English Language Center comprises of about 200 students who pay USC dues but aren't represented by any other faculty. They're not counted in any numbers for the purposes of determining council composition with this new system. Initially accepted the program to go into Western. So last year I spoke with the director of WELC, and he basically told me that for all intents and purposes, they are students. And since they pay USC dues, last year's council felt that they deserve a seat on council.
I know that the last thing that was posted isn't official, and now this one is. I'm just wondering, also engineering changed and Huron changed. Is that just because you looked at enrollment table we got? Numbers are not different for not just medicine, but engineering and Huron.
So when we realized that this was a problem, we didn't have enough time to pull the actual numbers for this year before sending it out to council. That's why it's being amended now. But the numbers on the one that was sent November 1st, 2016, and these year's numbers are from 2017, November 1st. The reason it's not currently 2018's November 1st is because they don't have those numbers yet. They're still crunching them. So last year, you wouldn't have been able to get the November because they haven't released them yet.
Okay, any other questions on this motion? Councillor Teja.
Councillor Teja, just a question. What's the source for the student population numbers that's used for Huron?
Given by Rick Campbell, who I believe is the lead of Western's Office of Institutional Budgeting and Planning. He forwarded these to me, so I'm sort of leaning on him for the accuracy, but as the head of...
Okay, any other questions on this motion? Councillor Teja?
Would there be a way to change this after the fact if I was able to provide you with a different set of up-to-date, accurate numbers?
These numbers were requested specifically for November 1st, 2017, since that's when they usually do the head counts. But if you can find conflicting numbers for November 1st, 2017, then I would recommend calling an emergency meeting.
Councillor Muffel?
Just as a question of curiosity, I'm from education. It's looking like there's a potential for us to have 2 seats, but we've where that increase happened. Because we have about on average 800 students per year. And that I was at a meeting with the associate dean present there, and our confirmed numbers for this year is 747.
You have 401 full-time equivalents to 747 numbers for full-time.
Is it including graduate students?
No, it's including part-time equivalent students, which is, so for every part-time student, it's worth 0.3 full-time students.
I'll just accept it. Your candidates both in year 1 and year 2, so I was just confused as to where we got over 1,000, but I could always just check in with her.
All right. Yeah, 747 numbers for full-time.
Councillor Foreman.
Jared Foreman, social science.
Yeah, we can now enter debate period. Councillor Foreman.
Motion to call the question.
All those in favor of calling to question? Okay, that passes. We will now call to question on this motion and poll. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are now closed, and the motion passes. Not unanimously. Okay. Moving to our final for action item for this evening. This motion was moved by Councilor Foreman, and I will look for a seconder for this motion. Councillor O'Connor. Okay, Councillor Foreman, would you like to speak to this motion?
Jared Foreman, social science president. So just before I begin with Justin Shapiro, and currently serves as VP Outreach of Western Hillel, the largest Jewish-oriented organization here on campus. And I'll be deferring my speaking rights once I'm finished speaking on this matter.
Just before you start, I'll ask council to vote on the allowing. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure we're okay with that. Okay, please continue, Councilor Foreman.
Thank you. So I'd just like to note today that the USC really has an opportunity to do something special today. If the USC passes this motion, we'd be the first student definition of anti-Semitism, showing that we are serious about this issue. We've seen just last month the incident in Pittsburgh where 11 members of the Jewish community were shot in their place of worship, the place where they're meant to be the most safe, in which anti-Semitic was drawn in a residence elevator. This isn't something abstract. This isn't something that we've moved on from. Anti-Semitism happens every single day, and it's only getting worse. As I know, individuals are the most targeted for reported hate crimes in the most recent year in which statistics are available. And the problem is only getting worse. There's articles coming out constantly illustrating that hate crimes, again, not just for Jewish individuals, are on the rise in our increasingly divisive society. Beyond the hours student council should be doing more surrounding I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have programming surrounding International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I strongly implore everyone here to acknowledge that education surrounding Holocaust remembrance needs to be better, not just on this campus, not just in Canada, but worldwide. I'd like to state that the experts on anti-Semitism are Western Hillel, are the Jewish community, and by formulating this memorandum of understanding, we are taking important active steps to addressing anti-Semitism here at Western. And with that, I'd like to defer my speaking rights to Justin Shapiro.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Jared Foreman for submitting this important motion for those very impactful words. Tonight, I want us to reflect on intolerance faced by Jewish students on campuses. When dozens of Jewish student events across North America last year were violently disrupted, is that intolerance? When Jewish students are shunned from student government, ejected from social justice movements, and ostracized from campus life because of their Jewish agenda, people act harder in the Jewish community. As we saw with the shooting at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue, we don't need to fight anti-Semitism because it can be uncomfortable. We fight it because it's lethal. Sadly, anti-Semitic acts which make Jewish students feel unsafe and unwelcome on campus often fly under the radar. One of his professors for guidance on postgraduate programs, his professor refused in a scathing email. He accused Ari of being an agent sent by the Israeli government to spy. He accused Ari of attempting to indoctrinate students, professors, and the administrations to be pro-Israel. That's intolerance. And Ari's story is terrifying, but it's by no means unique. These incidents are becoming more and more common on university campuses. And we, as leaders not only of this university, but as the future leaders of this country, can take a stand. We can take a stand for what's right. Bigotry have no place at Western. And that is why I'm calling on the University Students' Council to adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. IRA stands for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It's a group of 31 member states, including Canada, dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism adopted by the European Youth Forum. But as Jared said, we can be the first school in Canada to adopt this definition and fight anti-Semitism. If we don't accept this motion, we'll continue to see what we've always seen: baseless hatred and marginalization of Jewish students. However, if we unite and across the country, we will empower students to feel safe and included, which is a fundamental right that should be shared by all students. And if we let safety become a privilege shared by only a select few, then is it even a right at all? So friends, I call on you to adopt this motion. With a simple vote, we can send a powerful message to the Jewish community at Western. What can we do to make Western an even more inclusive place for all of its students? We must take a stand and go one step further and affirm that never again is a reality. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do know that complacency nourishes prejudice, and that prejudice can turn quickly forward and community. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor O'Connor, would you like to speak to this motion? No, sorry. Okay, any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing.
The BERT at the end regarding the establishment of an MOU. I'm just wondering if there's any preliminary thoughts around and what an MOU could entail or look like in terms of this sense.
So essentially this was left intentionally broad so that stating that the intention is to address anti-Semitism, so it would likely be information campaigns, programming centric.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Lawler.
Kieran Lawler, Social Science Council. To adopt this definition, would it conflict with the free speech policy that is being pushed on universities?
It shouldn't conflict with it at all. Anti-Semitism is hate speech under Canadian law.
Any other questions? No, it's not.
Maybe not. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm Teja Huron, President. The motion made it through Advocacy Standing Committee with some serious debate around a few different points. So number one is that this would be amending a policy that has been to this point, so it's never been specific to a group on campus. And in committee, we had a discussion on whether or not we wanted to be specific. And the consensus that our committee came to is yes. We do want to be more specific with our definition of discrimination. However, we have struck a working group to look at other forms of discrimination against other marginalized communities. So it's not just going to be general and then anti-Semitism. We're actually going to look into discrimination against the LGBTQ community, against international students, etc. So background regarding the specifics about types of discrimination. And the second thing that I just wanted to touch on that we talked about in committee that is probably a sensitive topic that's on a bunch of people's minds right now is BDS. And so as we discussed and as well as going through this, we kind of came to the determination that this motion would not preclude BDS from any campus, but it would preclude the maybe certain ways of that it's been promoted in the past that it would have been considered discriminatory.
Juliana Van Gillen, President Health Studies. I would just like to take the moment to speak in favor of this motion. We've had the blessed experience to actually partake in a couple of the Jewish community, and they have been absolutely wonderful and welcoming. And the thing is any Jew that I have ever encountered has always had the best interests of everyone at heart. And I just think that that is a testament to the Jewish community. And I think that anything that is anti-Semitic is just having a say. And I think in this particular time with the Pittsburgh situation, we do need to take this step, and it is necessary. And this is the time, and we are the council to do this.
Councillor Marginian.
I'd like to defer.
Heavily in favor of this, having worked very closely with Jared on this motion. I think that this motion represents a very critical moment for us, and not only like in the history of our organization and also at Canadian universities. I think at a time when we are noticing the world becoming more and more divided, where I think many biases coming back again, that even as members who are not in the Jewish community, it's incredibly important for us to stand together with all marginalized communities, with all students who need that support, to say that anti-Semitism and any form of bigotry and any form of racism is not tolerable and will not be welcomed. And to be there to support another, to make this historic moment happen, where we, as the first university to adopt something like this, to make sure that we codify it and entrench it within our documents.
President Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Us as student leaders should be inherently supporting and doing everything we can to prevent any discrimination, bigotry, or hate from manifesting itself on this campus and Western's campus, regardless. I'm proud to hear that Councillor Tasia's commitment towards broadening the definition of what we are in our everyday lives, and having these tough conversations with our friends and colleagues on campus to make sure that no student feels out of place in any discussion, any classroom, or walking around campus itself. So I'm proud to be in support of this motion, and I'm proud to see this come to council floor this evening.
Councillor Hollenberg. Okay, we will call a question on this motion. Polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are now closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, that is the end of our 4 action items for this evening. We now will enter our 4 information section, starting with our executive reports.
Hello, friends. I don't have strep throat today, so I'm going to talk your ear off for the rest of the evening. No. Don't worry, I'm not going to hold you hostage here. All right, so. I don't have any jokes for you, just a commitment. I'm going to shave off this god-awful goatee in a few days' time. We will not be entertaining any motions to wax off my goatee. All right, so completed. So moving into the federal lobby week for next week. So as I said, at the undergraduate intensive universities. So we are members, we are 9 out of 15 members of the U15 schools, so the 15 largest universities across Canada. We have McGill, University of Manitoba, UBC, Western Queens, Waterloo, McMaster, U of T. Basically, we are Parliament Hill next week. Danny and I will be attending, and we have over 30 meetings with MPs set up in which we are going to talk about a lot of federal issues impacting students across the country, such as the restructuring of the federal grant system for student aid and federal government, looking at grants for students versus tax credits. As well as international student concerns and a wide range of other issues that we are going to be lobbying on that I will be happy to follow up in any information or if you guys have any questions for me after. So we're super excited for next week and it should be great. So executive or second us from Toronto and things like that. It's actually so we can get away from campus. We can really take some time, meet with former USC alumni, take an objective look at our portfolios, kind of wondering how can we best perform and how can we best restructure our different portfolios for are we looking for of students and our different capacities and our different parts of our portfolios. And so last 2 weeks ago, Danny and I went to Queen's Park to participate in USA's Advocacy Week. I will touch on this a little bit more because I will be delivering Danny's presentation. And 2 weeks ago, we delivered the State of the USC, so kind of our midterm address. I'm happy to report the State of the Union down south may not be as strong, but I feel that the State of the Union at the USC is going very well, and I'm very proud of the work what we have accomplished this coming year. So we are currently underway with consultations because of a few of the curveballs thrown by the provincial government recently in the past few months. Western has had to rethink a lot of its cannabis procedures, and so I've been meeting with the heads of health and safety at Western, the heads of HR, to ensure that students under the cannabis smoke-free policy can actually not smoke cannabis on campus. They can order it to residences and many other different things, many other different facets and companies with this. I raised a lot of concerns around consumptions of edibles, joint consumption of cannabis and alcohol, and what educational programming Western was going to be there. So increased campus outreach / education about the USC. So you may be wondering why I have been coming to all your respective council meetings to kind of make you hear me talk again. But I think the reality is that not only reality we need to face, there's very little understanding about how the USC works itself. So for those who have seen the presentation, I think recently we went to education, social science, and a few other faculties recently in accompaniment of the groups of last time I presented about this. But it's basically a quick 5-minute presentation. Important to go and see your elected student representatives out being accountable to you and learning more and being able to ask them direct questions. So if you have any more questions to me about this, or I have not come to your council yet to this point in time, please let me know. As well as we've been looking to get further first year engagement councils. Said the same message back to me where they didn't know how the USC worked, they didn't understand it, but I was able to, through a lot of discussion, clarify this for them, and I think that's an inherently important thing on this campus. As well as our open office hours, we have been moving around to different buildings on campus so we can directly engage and discuss with your students. I was at Huron today, which
So executive portfolio analysis and restructuring. So as a result of our executive retreat, we are going to be making some decisions that will probably be reflected within budget 2018-2019, but those updates will be coming. And executive gap analysis and job descriptions. So similar theme, similar vein. We have been working on and analyzing with our HR department about how to produce, I think, more cohesive and coherent job descriptions for what our executive positions actually look like and what we actually touch in our day-to-day jobs. And I think this is really going to inform the perspective surrounding elections and surrounding applications for future. Student ancillary fee discussion. So as you have seen, Jenny Massey has just presented to council about a new proposal for a fee for $12 increase for students. And so when you speak about $12 increase for students, you really need to kind of think and do that quick maths in your head of like, that is, right? So Danny is another voting member, and we have 2 other undergraduate representatives alongside our colleagues at the Society of Graduate Students. And this is a very important committee in terms of remaining accountable to the student body and how we have that fee oversight for a lot of the different services students pay into on campus, like the rec center, like varsity athletics. And so taking a more holistic look at the ancillary fees students pay and potentially finding some places in which we can reduce that financial burden for students as well. All right, and to come, so next week, our lobby week, as I touched on, the USC Foundation. So the USC Foundation is still awaiting charitable status at this council meeting. Expanding the size of the board, because we are only, I believe, 5 members right now, so we were looking to expand that to just under 10 to get some more diversity in our representation on the board right now, because there's only 1 woman currently sitting on our board, and we're looking to hire more USC alumni in this respect. As well, initiative, how we provide that funding. Student initiative proposals look like that align with our 3 pillars of sexual violence prevention education, mental health and wellness supports on campus, as well as experiential learning opportunities. And as always is a constant concern, continue consultations, as well as working with our administration around potential task force regarding this solution, because I've always said student safety should not be a month-long discussion, it should be a year-long discussion and how we're actually looking at this. And educational partnerships, RE cannabis consumption. So we've been in the field, do programming around cannabis consumption, and also to get some statistics on what cannabis consumption actually looks like on this campus as well, to better inform our programming and our decision. Cool. Hi, I'm Danny. Sorry, stop tapping. Yeah. Clubs MOU, room booking, waiting on review. We want to have something long-term to make sure clubs are allowed to book rooms in the UCC with the support from the university. So basically, we've been looking at redefining this memorandum of understanding with the university and how our clubs are booking the room to all of our a lot of different clubs book rooms in different faculties and different buildings around campus. So this is something we've been looking to refine and centralize. Weldon. So the Weldon revitalization consultation. We are consulting on what the space should look like process and making sure that we're actually prioritizing or trying to open up new spaces for students so their study schedules aren't impacted. So the university struck a sexual violence prevention review and working group at Karina as well too. So work and it's on this committee to fully inform them. So the prioritized list of inclusive washroom retrofits with Ally and Pride. So working with Ally and Pride to prioritize a list for this university. There will be a long-term list for them to prioritize making inclusive commitment to, in every new building that they construct, there will be a gender neutral washroom space within the building. Okay, so municipal, provincial, and federal. So we are going to be moving into this. So Western Road, expected to finish on time. About this issue, I know Anam is very passionate about this issue. Supposed to be done tomorrow. Yes, I drive along Warncliffe every day, so I know, and I can see the groups of students waiting for buses along there, and you can also see the amount of traffic. we... Okay, well, that would be the lifespan of this executive, so I really do not hope that it is June 2019. I can follow up with you after to see where you got that date and figure.
Hi, President Pratt. Danny has...
There's another question? Aaron, sorry.
This is for Danny and Mitch.
Yeah.
In terms of construction, do you have any updates on the bridge and when that construction might be finished?
Okay, so the bridge is still undergoing inspections. So as I explained to a few of the councils, and there's a lot to do with this and making sure that as we moved into the winter, when they did close it, that when the cold comes, that the structural supports of the bridge could get more brittle in that sense. So it could pose a serious risk. There is a lot of other concerns around, and stick with me as I explain this a little bit. Of the Thames Valley Conservation Society actually has a lot of stipulations around the construction you can conduct around the Thames Valley watershed due to an endangered species of box turtle, I think it is. You can look more into that on your own time, feel free. I know it sounds like a deep Reddit thread, but best of luck. At the start of our term is we went to go meet with the Fanshawe Student Union, and between us and Fanshawe, we actually make up over 51% of the ridership of LTC. Western students make up 37%, and the Fanshawe makes up the rest, and so this is an important advocacy piece for us. Minister's presentation, actually we can move forward to the new slides as well. So, ongoing. Okay, so food insecurity on campus. I'm sticking to the script, I promise. Students shouldn't just eat Mr. Noodles. That's all it says. So looking into... The script isn't that good, so I don't, okay. Long-term plan to relieve stress for... So the medical note policy. So the long-term plan to relieve stress on students requiring medical notes for short-term illness. Cool. Leave the grammar up down to Danny. So student fees. A current fee that supports student fees. I feel like this needs more. Nominate professors. Okay. Danny's format is very confusing here. Based on years of investment into it, we're looking at potentially reducing that annual fee for students without impacting the amount of financial aid the university can give out. So this is the student fee ancillary discussion we've been having and the research that's been put into it. So taking a holistic view at the student fees that we distribute. So that all students can be attending. I will post this in the council group after for further distribution if you are curious about this. So Danny and his team have been doing some research in association with the rec center so that could be a more safe and inclusive for its students. And which is a student-nominated system for teachers, which the USC oversees, and it is an annual thing. And so moving into the next slides. Yes, so this is all the lovely participation at the USA General Assembly. So you, as a council, elected your delegates to represent Western student interests at USA to help. Policy papers that were passed were on tuition, teaching assessment, technology-enabled learning, and freedom of expression. So I encourage you all to go take a look on USA's website and check out any of those. Cool. So Danny met with Jeff Urick, who is the Elgin Middlesex London representative, and also transit and making sure to the GTHA in Northern Ontario and supporting a London plan for better transit for students, because we all know we need that. Cool. All right, and then Danny met with MP Karen Vecchio, who is Elgin Middlesex London. She is the chair of the Status of Women Committee. A UCRU research brief on this subject that we are going to be taking to Parliament Hill next week. Sexual violence prevention on and off campus, raising many concerns, and the federal government released a very good report on the status of women in the country that I encourage you to check out as well as undergraduate research. All right, a lot of pictures. So Peter Fragiscatos roundtable, so the just a variety of topics: housing, campus safety, transit, anti-Semitism, etc. So basically, the people represented at the affiliate presidents were all invited to attend, and we had some very fruitful discussion with Peter. All right. And so moving into USA Advocacy Week. So USA Advocacy Week was largely the key voice for students in the province. We had the opportunity to sit down with the leaders of the NDP, Liberal, and Green parties, as well as the Minister of Training, Colleges, Universities, and the Premier. We're happy to have over 65 meetings during the week with MPPs and ministers across Ontario, highlighting student priorities across all MPPs in which we were able to have talks with, and truly the amount of access that USA was given is something I think that can't be understated. The amount of work that Danny has put into as USA president and ensuring that USA is the strongest voice for students in this province, and seeing the amount of access that we were able to gain need to be prioritizing as students. We all were able to discuss with the people who make these decisions at the provincial government. And so that amount of access and the importance of that advocacy cannot be understated. So I can't understate how proud I am of Danny and how proud this team is of Danny for truly putting his Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'll do you and myself a favor and keep this short. And if you have any questions about campus to shadow female MPs for a day, it was really successful, really happy to see how well that did. Some signage in the UCC, we've been increasing signage for the club space. You may have seen it near the stairwells. We've got the club space on the 3rd floor. We did a survey earlier in the summer to ask students change that. We've increased signage. Signage is extremely politicized on this campus in this building. It is wild. So that actually took a while, shockingly. So yay to bureaucracy. We're also increasing signage around the Peer Support Center and Food Support Services, which are on the 2nd floor. Associate and coordinator inventory. I put this on here because all of my coordinators have banners, and I've got 18 of them, and they cost about $300 each. And when those banners go missing, that is a financial loss for this organization. And it's not just banners, it's also high cost items such as a button maker, which actually took me a month to track down, was in the social sci office. Thank you, social science, for stealing that. And other items. November had the Vice President Student Events, week. Wonderful work to Cecilia, Ariana, and Misha. Great collaboration. Look forward to continuing to build that brand in the future and continuing that program. Words Festival promotions had Word Festival at the very beginning of November. We had my Public Arts Commissioner do really great work around promotions on campus and getting more this past week. It was in the UCCH room if you saw it. Ongoing sexual violence prevention. So much is going on that. If you have any questions, just ask me specifics and I can speak to it. Austin Burlette Campout. So I've been working with a couple individuals from the fraternity more of a community-based event, but doing more for the community in this event. So we've been working to see how we can do that. This week, right now, is Indigenous Awareness Week. The powwow was on the 24th. Really, really wonderful work that my new Indigenous Relations Coordinator has been doing with Indigenous Services and the Indigenous Students Association. Just going through operations, the orientation operations table, and fielding through all the amendments in order to ensure that we have a better way to hold SOS accountable when it comes to behavior management. Dance space, just wanted to speak briefly to that. So we, after our consultations with dance, into a bookable space for clubs that dance. So those items are just slowly being shipped in, and once I have more information about that, you will know, and additionally I'll be reaching out to the clubs who will be benefiting from this space. Women's leadership motion. So you would have Councillor Campbell's motion that happened earlier in the year. We just, last night was it, Mitch, Danny, myself, and Cecilia all sat on a panel for the campaign workshop, had a wonderful attendance, lots of great questions. Students just genuinely wanted to ask how to run a campaign, what does that look like, will roll out within the next couple months. Shout out to Michaela for really helping in this initiative. Additionally, Danny mentioned this in his report, facilities management and USC space MOU. Declan, my associate clubs, has done really, really great work in this. We realized that our club so we wanted to create an MOU in order to ensure that our clubs are still continue to have access to that space, and there is really good awareness on both sides between both Western's facilities management as well as the USC's to understand what the expectations of those space are so we can continue using those respectfully. The management in and around that that goes into kind of our coordinator events. I pride myself on being very meticulous when it comes to budget, so I'm doing a lot of work right now in ensuring that they're managing their budgets well and they're spending it appropriately. Last meeting approving and endorsing the checklist. Charity ball, just some updates. So sales have started. Our executive's working really hard in order to make this back into a community event. Charity ball is Western's formal, and we really want to bring it back to that caliber. Bring up the caliber again of Western charity ball because it's a phenomenal event. We want to get people out there. Crisis counseling is currently happening on campus. Will be into the second week of December. Working with Tri-Sci to do Purple Frost, the concert in what sectionality is and why they should care. Black History Month programming, just met with a couple students this afternoon in order to discuss what we can do in and around that. Really important awareness-based month, and we want to ensure that we're recognizing and doing the work and programming from the USC side. Early outreach. Phenomenal. If you know nothing about early outreach, please come ask me about it. It is a phenomenal initiative, and we're trying to ensure that it is sustainable financially. So we're doing some work around that. Children's Holiday Party through charity is run on December 1st, this Saturday. If you in Mustang Lounge at 10 p.m. Some exam distressors are also coming your way in the UCC atrium next month. World AIDS Awareness Day, Pride, Ally, and Health Promotions will be doing something on November 30th. Holocaust Remembrance Day, I've been meeting with some students to discuss. Before, so we're really happy to offer that. Still assessing Campus Vibe and the sustainability of that as an alternative to Western Link. I'm wanting to put out a club system survey, so essentially a survey out to all of our students in the club system to ask what they want from the club system so we can it really does work for them.
Hi, everyone. Just to clarify, this is me as the secretary. I don't know, I left 2 bullet points that are not supposed to be there. There is no bridge financing. That was, I copied it from a previous slide and used the formatting from orientation week. Anyway, sorry about that. The club's finance, so I ran a separate club's finance session, and we got so that was really fun. I also participated in the Kent Walk Furniture Review Committee, which is the new space that Western is kind of constructing in front of UC Tower Hill, yeah, all that. And then obviously our referendum working group. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of good work, and it was actually really great to get some counselors engaged in sort of these referendums and evaluating them and get student input and opinion. And I thought it was a really successful time, and I'm really happy to the counselors that helped came up with, and you know, I was able to pilot it with the referendum fee review working group, and I think to me, it was really successful to get that extra level of engagement and be able to sort of pilot working groups and see how that goes. Collaboration on crisis counseling collaboration, so there's always that. And what's to come is the budget. So we've just been gearing up for that. We've been having a lot of internal meetings, operational meetings, all of that has been happening as well. come up with a grants awareness plan that you'll see part of in my next slide, and the USC fees awareness plan, which I also will kind of do a little bit in my following slides. And we're also going to soon hire the appeals board based on the new structure that and all of that fun stuff to improve efficiency. So yeah. Okay, so grants awareness. So one of the things I thought would be kind of cool, since the grants is running out of my portfolio, is just bringing a little bit of awareness on some of the things that we funded. With some of the things that they've recently sort of voted on and funded to support. And overall, there's been over $25,000 so far distributed to things on campus. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Cool. But yeah, so I'll post it so you guys can just peruse it at your leisure. And the next slide has some photos. So I just thought it'd be kind of cool to show how our grants fund goes into helping student initiatives on campus. And this is kind of an internal and so this is a little bit also about the fee awareness that I also want to talk about. So a lot of times students will only hear about student fees and that around budget season. So I'm starting a little bit early in terms of trying to figure out how to just create a fee. It's the only thing that I don't know why there was an amendment. There was supposed to be a little asterisk that says the orientation week fee is only for first year students. I don't know why that didn't show up there. Maybe I posted the wrong version of it. But just to note, the $100 orientation week can opt out of the health if you have existing health coverage, and you can prove that. That also sort of affects the fee that each student pays a little bit, is opt-outs and then the first year fee. But yeah, so I just thought it was a cool graphic to share with all of you. Yeah, any questions? No? Great. Cool. All right. Okay. Okay, so the first thing on my list is the Women House Communications Plan with the Student Programs Officer, so Karina. We focused on a rollout of how we wanted to convey this information out to students, and then we also touched base on media relations, which primarily worked with the Gazette and CFPL. A very successful event. The next thing on the list is the state of the USC. So we did promotion, speech, and event also for that, all coordinated under my portfolio. The next piece on my list is the media relations, which but I thought that would also be important to highlight just in case you weren't aware that that is something that my portfolio handles every week. And it talks about the different initiatives and events that are ongoing on campus run by the USC. So the next thing is UOF updates, providing updates. Really cool conference in Toronto for Social Media Week with our marketing co-op student, and it was very fruitful, and I'm hoping that we can bring some of that dialogue back to the USC. So to come, campus office hours, as you know, are rotating, and different buildings at what time, so they can be more conscious and come out and attend if they want. We usually do cookies with a conversation, but right now for the month of November we had caramel-filled beignets. Pretty exciting, if you ask me. The next piece is the Week at a Glitch. Highlighting cool services that the USC is doing, but not duplicating efforts is the main goal there. The student survey implementation and launch is for the fall term, so we'll have something close to the end of December, which will be exciting. We're also looking to integrate focus groups, promotion of the executive and different responsibilities within the actual organization. So not just the executive, but also really cool opportunities within the USC. The next thing is the Women in Leadership's video series, which The next thing is USC exec holiday cards. We have some very festive, very fun cards coming out. We'll be sure to share them with you all. It's really fun, but yeah, stay tuned. The next thing is we're working on a USC weekly briefing email, which will on within the organization that people don't necessarily know about because they're part of our services and day-to-day operations. So looking to find a way to highlight those really cool things going on. And that is all.
Or if you were planning to, because I think at this point in the night, some of us might be a little hard of hearing, so that I think would help to really keep us informed. Yeah. So I was wondering if you were continuing to do that.
Yeah, so the reason we kind of did that in the summer is because we had a lot of really big projects to update people on that were micro details. If that's something that you would all like. Cool.
I think so.
I shall do that.
Great. Thank you very much to all of our executives.
Hi, everyone. Okay, a couple things. So we're having a board meeting this Friday. So from our last meeting, we did some sort of administrative financials, and there's nothing of concern in there. And then this meeting, this Friday, we will be looking at the appeals board. So we'll be passing a policy to create an appeals board for elections, since that has formed at that meeting. We do need a council representative. My hope is that Juliana will continue on, since she acted previously when we needed an interim director. And I think we're going to vote on whether you guys are okay with that.
Or any ballots for this evening. So we can't actually do an election, and we need someone to fill this position as soon as possible. Since we already elected Juliana, I would like to put it up to council for another vote if we are okay with having for your position again.
Great. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate that. There's nothing else that I really want to touch on, unless anybody has any questions for me. You're all welcome to talk to me.
Okay, we will now have the report from the chair of the student senators.
Fall reading week review that's coming up. They struck an ad hoc committee. There was originally not going to be much student representation on there, but the student senators fought for it and we got a spot. Yeah, so 2 undergraduate representatives and a graduate representatives from SOGS. Okay. I don't know how much everyone here knows about the Sunday exam proposal motion. Lessen the impact that Sunday exams or Sunday midterms would have on students. Right now the current proposal is that they wouldn't start before 10:30 or 10 o'clock to give students time to get to campus on
Thank you. That spring USA was definitely from last meeting of council.
So in terms of governance and finance, tonight we saw most of the stuff that we've been working on. With that out of the way now, we sort of have a clean slate. We're going to start coming up with some new ideas on how to coming up, and to that end, GNF might be looking at some ways to make sure that people are informed, and as was mentioned, I think earlier, that hopefully the ballot is not the first time people are figuring out that there's going to be a referendum on this, so making sure people are informed.
Okay, next up, Advocacy Standing Committee.
Hey guys, Western is administration, just discussing what the working definition of experiential learning should be and how that working group is going to be moving forward. As you guys know from this council meeting, we discussed the anti-Semitism motion. Find them and put them into our community standards policy. We also had a lot of members of our committee meet with Peter Fredriskatos, our local MP, to discuss a lot of student issues, as Mitch touched upon. Next portfolio coming to give a presentation regarding what they're up to. Thanks, that's all from me.
Okay, and then the Student Experience Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone. Not too many super exciting things to update you on, but at our last meeting, we did have the privilege of Mitch Pratt paying us a visit. So he basically just came to talk about the Environmental Sustainability Working Group. We just ratified it, I believe. Cecilia kind of looked more into this idea of offering weekend bus service to the GTA and potentially other areas. We discovered there's maybe a lot more issues than we thought with doing that in terms of getting Greyhound to not be super annoyed and other things. I got in touch with the people in charge of those this week, and if you are one of the two people, Cecilia and that said you were going to help out with that, we're going to kind of start that this week. I will message people. And beyond that,
Okay, and now the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee. The anti-Semitism motion that was on the agenda tonight that was passed through the Advocacy Standing Committee. We also had the referenda concerning the health and dental fee plan, as well as council composition were and then we approved that agenda as amended, and that's what you all got in your email. And we will do the same thing in January. Thank you. Information. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring to council for discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there any new business? Okay, seeing none, I will look for a mover and a second. Okay, the meeting is ended. Go home. Have a great holiday. We won't see you till January.